What happens when a man who has nothing saves a woman who has everything? Tonight you'll witness a collision that rewrites two lives forever, a single father's desperate mercy crashing into a CEO's empire of steel. One rainstorm, one burning car, one choice that should have been simple but became the most dangerous thing either of them ever touched. This is the story of Caleb Mercer and Sloan Ashford, two people who thought they understood survival until they had to survive each other. Stay until the end to see how far love can travel when it refuses to be bought. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches. The rain didn't fall on Portland that November night. It attacked. It came down in sheets so thick the streetlights barely penetrated, turning the world into a blur of gray and black, water and shadow. The kind of rain that made you question every choice that led you outside, that soaked through your jacket in seconds and reminded you how small you were against the indifference of nature. Caleb Mercer's truck coughed through the storm like it was drowning, windshield wipers slapping a losing battle against the deluge. The heater hadn't worked in 3 months. His breath came out in visible puffs, mixing with the smell of old coffee and the faint ghost of Lily's strawberry shampoo from this morning's school drop-off. He should have been home 2 hours ago. The Thompson job had run late, always did when you were fixing a 60-year-old furnace with parts held together by prayer and electrical tape. But Mr. Thompson was 83 and on a fixed income, and Caleb had a hard time saying no to people who reminded him of his own father. So he'd stayed, gotten it running, and accepted the $70 in crumpled bills that probably represented the old man's grocery money for the week. Caleb had tried to refuse it. Mr. Thompson had insisted with that particular stubbornness that comes with age and pride. Caleb understood pride. He lived on it, most days, when the bank account ran dry and Lily needed new shoes. The $70 sat in his jacket pocket now, already earmarked, $40 for the electric bill, $30 for groceries. If he was lucky, there'd be enough left over for... His headlights caught something wrong. Caleb's foot hit the brake instinctively, the truck skidding slightly on the wet asphalt before grinding to a stop. He squinted through the rain-blurred windshield, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Off the side of the road, maybe 20 feet down the embankment, a car sat crumpled against a thick oak tree. Not just any car, even from here, even through the storm, Caleb could tell it was expensive. Sleek lines, luxury body, the kind of vehicle that cost more than he'd made in the past 5 years combined. The headlights were still on, but fading, flickering like dying stars. And as Caleb watched, a thin curl of smoke began to rise from the crushed hood, barely visible against the rain. Shit. He was out of the truck before his brain caught up with his body, rain immediately soaking him to the skin. The cold hit like a fist, November rain in the Pacific Northwest that carried the promise of winter in every drop. Caleb half ran, half slid down the embankment, mud sucking at his work boots. Up close, the damage was worse. The entire front end of the car had accordioned into the tree, metal twisted and glass scattered like diamonds across the wet ground. The driver's side door was crumpled inward, impossible to open. He circled to the passenger side, his heart hammering against his ribs. Through the shattered window, he could see someone slumped in the driver's seat, held in place by the airbag and seatbelt. Long dark hair obscured their face. No movement. "Hey!" Caleb shouted, yanking at the passenger door. It resisted, then gave with a groan of tortured metal. "Can you hear me?" Nothing. The smoke was getting thicker now, no longer just a curl but a steady stream. Caleb's hands were shaking as he climbed into the passenger seat, glass crunching under his knees. He could smell it now, hot metal, burning plastic, the acrid promise of fire. Come on," he muttered, reaching across to unbuckle the seatbelt. His fingers fumbled with the clasp, slick with rain and blood. There was blood on the steering wheel, on the deflating airbag, dark against the white fabric. The woman stirred, letting out a soft groan that was barely audible over the rain. "I've got you," Caleb said, not sure if he was talking to her or himself. "Just hold on." The seatbelt finally released. Caleb hooked his arms under hers, trying to be gentle, but knowing there wasn't time for gentle. She was surprisingly light, or maybe it was just adrenaline making him strong. He pulled her across the center console, her head lolling against his shoulder. That's when he saw her face. Even pale and blood-streaked, even unconscious, she was striking in a way that made Caleb's breath catch. Sharp cheekbones, full lips, features that belonged on magazine covers or movie screens. Mid-30s, maybe. Expensive looking even in crisis, with that particular polish that came from money and power. Another curl of smoke, thicker now, accompanied by a smell that made Caleb's instincts scream. He dragged her out of the car, stumbling backward out of the passenger door and nearly falling in the mud. She was starting to come around, making small sounds of confusion and pain, but still mostly dead weight in his arms. Caleb half-carried, half-dragged her up the embankment, his boots slipping on the wet grass and mud. His lungs burned, his shoulders screamed. The rain made everything harder, made every step a battle against gravity and exhaustion. They were maybe 15 feet from the car when it happened. The explosion wasn't like the movies, no massive fireball, no dramatic whoosh of flame. Instead, there was a soft whump sound, and suddenly the entire vehicle was engulfed, fire licking up through the smoke despite the rain, hungry and hot and absolute. Caleb felt the heat of it on his back as he finally reached the road, as he laid the woman down on the wet asphalt as gently as his shaking arms would allow. She was breathing. He could see her chest rising and falling, could hear the soft catch of air in her throat. He pulled out his phone with trembling hands, but he already knew what he'd see. No signal. This far out, in this weather, with the cell towers probably overloaded from the storm. No hospitals nearby anyway, he muttered to himself, staring at the woman's unconscious form. The nearest emergency room was 30 minutes away in good weather. In this storm, on these roads with flooding likely, an hour, maybe more. She needed help now. Caleb looked at his truck, then at the woman, then at the burning wreckage of her car casting flickering orange light across the rain-soaked night. Every instinct told him to wait, to flag down another car, to do anything except what he was about to do. But there were no other cars. The road was empty, would probably stay empty, and she was bleeding from a gash on her forehead, her breathing growing more labored by the second. "God damn it," Caleb breathed, then bent and carefully lifted her into his arms. The drive back to his house was a nightmare of concentration and terror. Caleb had one hand on the wheel, the other steadying the woman in the passenger seat where he'd carefully positioned her, reclined as far back as the seat would go. She drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling words he couldn't quite catch over the sound of rain hammering the truck's roof. "Stay with me," he kept saying, though he wasn't sure if she could hear him. Just a little longer. His house, if you could call it that, sat on the edge of a neighborhood that had seen better days about 40 years ago and had been declining ever since. Small, boxy, the kind of rental that landlords forgot about, except when it was time to collect money. Caleb had lived here for 3 years, ever since Sarah died, and he'd had to downsize from their apartment to something he could barely afford on his irregular income. He pulled into the gravel driveway, killed the engine, and sat for a moment in the sudden relative quiet. Through the rain-streaked windows he could see his porch light, the only one on the street still burning at this hour. Inside, Mrs. Chen would be asleep on the couch, having watched Lily until Caleb got home. The same arrangement they'd had for months now, Mrs. Chen refusing payment beyond the occasional dinner or help fixing things around her house. Caleb looked at the woman in his passenger seat. She'd gone still again, her face pale in the dim light. What the hell was he doing? He should have driven to the hospital anyway, storm or no storm. This was insane. This was... She moaned softly, and fresh blood trickled from the cut on her forehead. Caleb got out of the truck. Mrs. Chen woke the moment he opened the door, the woman in his arms. The elderly neighbor took one look at the situation and transformed from sleepy retiree to efficient nurse, a remnant of her years working at a manual hospital before she retired. "Guest room," she said simply, already moving to turn on lights, grab towels. "Lily? Sleeping?" "Like the dead. Go." Caleb's guest room was barely big enough for the twin bed that occupied it. His bed, actually, since Lily had the only bedroom and he'd been sleeping on the couch for 3 years. He laid the woman down as gently as he could, her dark hair fanning across his pillow, looking wrong and right at the same time. Mrs. Chen appeared with the first aid kit, warm water, clean towels. "I'll stay," she said quietly. "Make sure she doesn't slip away. You should rest." But Caleb couldn't rest. He sat in the kitchen instead, still in his wet clothes, staring at nothing while Mrs. Chen worked in the other room. The clock on the wall, a cheap plastic thing Lily had picked out, covered in cartoon cats, ticked toward 3 in the morning. What had he done? Brought a stranger into his home, into the same space where his daughter slept. He didn't know this woman, didn't know if she was dangerous, if she was wanted, if... She's stable, Mrs. Chen said, appearing in the kitchen doorway. Concussion, probably. That cut needed stitches, but I did my best. She should wake up soon, and when she does, you should take her to a real hospital. Thank you, Caleb said, his voice rough. Mrs. Chen studied him for a long moment. You did a good thing tonight, Caleb. Did I? You saved someone's life. Don't overthink it. She patted his shoulder on her way out, letting herself out the front door and presumably back to her own house next door. Caleb sat in the silence of his kitchen, listening to the rain finally start to ease, and wondered if Mrs. Chen was right. He must have fallen asleep on the couch, because the next thing Caleb knew, sunlight was streaming through the thin curtains and Lily was standing next to him, her small hand on his shoulder. Daddy, you slept in your clothes again. Caleb sat up quickly, disoriented, his neck protesting the awkward angle he'd been sleeping at. Hey, sweetheart, what time is it? Almost 7. Mrs. Chen said you had a venture last night. Lily was 7, gap-toothed and bright-eyed, with her mother's dark curls and Caleb's stubborn chin. She was wearing her favorite pajamas, the ones with the planets on them. What's a venture? Adventure, Caleb corrected automatically, his brain still trying to catch up. Then he remembered. The crash. The woman. There's a lady in your room, Lily announced matter-of-factly. She's sleeping. I know, baby. She was in an accident last night. I'm helping her until she feels better. Lily processed this with the seriousness she applied to all new information. Is she nice? I don't know yet. Oh. Lily climbed onto the couch next to him, tucking herself under his arm the way she did every morning. Is she going to stay? Just until she's better. Okay. Then after a pause, Daddy, we're out of cereal. Of course they were. Caleb went through the motions of getting Lily ready for school, making her toast with the last of the peanut butter, braiding her hair the way Sarah used to, checking her backpack for homework. Normal things. Familiar things. Things that kept the strangeness of the situation at bay. Mrs. Chen appeared at 7:30 to walk Lily to the bus stop, another part of their routine. As they left, the elderly woman gave Caleb a knowing look. She woke up about an hour ago. Wouldn't tell me her name, but she's lucid and scared. Scared? Wouldn't you be? Waking up in a strange place, not knowing how you got there. Mrs. Chen squeezed his arm. Be gentle, Caleb. Not everyone is used to kindness from strangers. After they left, Caleb stood in his kitchen and tried to prepare himself. He should check on her, make sure she was okay, maybe offer food or water or... She appeared in the doorway before he could finish the thought. Caleb's breath caught. She was wearing his white t-shirt, the clean one he'd left on the chair in the guest room in case she needed it, and it hung to mid-thigh, revealing legs that went on forever. Her dark hair was loose and slightly damp, like she'd tried to wash the blood out in the bathroom sink. The gash on her forehead had been cleaned and bandaged, but a bruise was already forming around it, purple and ugly against her pale skin. But it was her eyes that stopped Caleb cold. Gray-blue, sharp as broken glass, assessing everything in the space of a heartbeat. The kind of eyes that belonged to someone used to reading people, used to finding weaknesses and exploiting them. Dangerous eyes, despite the vulnerability of her situation. Where am I? Her voice was hoarse, but there was steel underneath. My house. Portland. You were in an accident last night. Your car went off the road. I pulled you out before it caught fire. She processed this without visible reaction, those sharp eyes never leaving his face. You brought me here instead of a hospital. The roads were flooded, storm was too bad, and you needed immediate help. My neighbor used to be a nurse. She checked you over, made sure you were stable. I see. She crossed her arms, and despite the borrowed t-shirt and the bruises, she somehow managed to look intimidating. Thank you for the rescue. If you'll tell me where my phone is, I'll arrange a car and be out of your way. Something about her tone made Caleb's jaw tighten. It was the voice of someone used to giving orders, used to people jumping to obey. The voice of someone who thought everything, including gratitude, was just another transaction. Your phone was destroyed in the crash, he said flatly, along with your purse, your car, and almost you. A flicker of something, fear, frustration, crossed her face before she locked it down. Then I'll need to borrow yours. It's charging in my room, but you should probably eat something first. Get your bearings. I'm fine. You have a concussion. I said I'm fine. She took a step forward, and Caleb noticed the slight waver in her stance, the way she steadied herself against the doorframe. I appreciate what you did, truly, but I need to leave now. Why? The question seemed to catch her off guard. Excuse me? Why the rush? You almost died last night. You have a head injury. You can barely stand straight. Caleb gestured around his tiny kitchen. I know this isn't the Ritz, but you're safe here. You can rest, make your calls, arrange whatever you need to arrange. What's the harm in that? She studied him for a long moment, and Caleb had the uncomfortable feeling of being dissected, analyzed, reduced to data points and risk assessments. You don't know who I am, she said finally. Should I? Something flickered in her eyes again. Surprise maybe, or relief. No, I suppose not. She seemed to come to some internal decision. All right, I'll accept your hospitality for a few hours, but then I really do need to leave. Fair enough? Caleb moved toward the coffee pot, needing something to do with his hands. Coffee? Please. They sat at his kitchen table, a scratched second-hand thing that wobbled unless you knew to avoid leaning on the left side. In awkward silence, Caleb watched her cup the mug in both hands like she was trying to warm herself from the inside out. Noticed the way she took small, measured sips like she was afraid of showing weakness. What's your name? He asked finally. She hesitated. Does it matter? I pulled you out of a burning car, brought you to my house, let you sleep in my bed. Yeah, I think I've earned a name. A hint of a smile touched her lips, there and gone so fast he almost missed it. Sloan. Caleb. He raised his coffee mug slightly. Nice to meet you, Sloan. Sorry about the circumstances. Me too. She took another sip, her eyes drifting around the kitchen. He tried to see it through her eyes, the cracked linoleum, the ancient appliances, the crayon drawing Lily had made stuck to the refrigerator with a magnet. Poor, the room said, struggling, barely holding on. Caleb waited for the judgment, the pity, the condescension. Instead, Sloan said, You have a daughter. Lily, she's 7. The neighbor mentioned her. Sloan's gaze landed on him again. Does she know I'm here? Yeah, she wanted to know if you were nice. I told her I didn't know yet. That almost smile again. And what's the verdict? Jury's still out. They drank their coffee. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the world washed clean and bright. Caleb could hear birds starting up their morning songs, the distant sound of traffic as Portland woke up and went about its business. I should tell someone where I am, Sloan said eventually. People will be worried. Use my phone. It's in your room, charging. Yes. She stood, steadier now, though Caleb noticed she kept one hand on the table for balance. Thank you. She disappeared back into the guest room, leaving Caleb alone with his coffee and his thoughts. He tried not to listen to her conversation, but his house was small and the walls were thin. He caught fragments, her voice low and urgent, speaking to someone named Marcus, assuring him she was fine, she was safe, she'd explain later. Then another call, this one shorter, more clipped. Business, maybe. Damage control. When she emerged again 20 minutes later, some of the tension had left her shoulders. She'd found her pants. Caleb had washed them and hung them to dry overnight, and looked slightly more like herself, though the borrowed t-shirt still hung loose and oversized. My assistant is arranging a car, she said. It'll be here within the hour. Good. Caleb stood, collecting the coffee mugs. You should probably get checked out at a hospital. Make sure I have a personal physician. He'll meet me at my hotel. Of course she did. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Caleb had the strangest urge to ask her to stay, which was insane. He didn't know this woman, didn't know anything about her except that she was clearly wealthy, clearly used to a very different life than his, and clearly counting the minutes until she could escape back to it. "Thank you," Sloane said finally, and there was genuine warmth in her voice. "For last night, for this morning, for all of it. Anyone would have done the same." "No." She met his eyes, and for a moment the sharp assessment was gone, replaced by something softer, more vulnerable. "They really wouldn't have." Before Caleb could respond, she reached into her pants pocket and pulled out a checkbook. Caleb felt something cold settle in his stomach as she opened it, as she pulled a pen from God knows where and started writing. "What are you doing?" "Compensating you for your time, your supplies, the inconvenience." "Stop." She looked up, pen poised over paper. "Excuse me?" "I don't want your money." The words came out harder than he intended, but Caleb didn't care. Something hot and angry was building in his chest, something that had been simmering since she'd walked into his kitchen with that assessing look, since she'd reduced his home to the Ritz with her tone. "Don't be ridiculous," Sloane said, her voice taking on that commanding quality again. "You clearly need it, and I clearly owe you." "You don't owe me shit." Caleb stepped forward and had the satisfaction of seeing her eyes widen slightly. "I didn't pull you out of that car for a payday. I didn't bring you here, give up my bed, use my supplies because I thought there was a check in it for me. I did it because you needed help and I was there. That's it. That's the whole story." "Everyone needs money," Sloane said, but there was uncertainty creeping into her voice now. "Yeah, I need money. You know what else I need? To be able to look my daughter in the eye and know I did the right thing for the right reasons. To not teach her that kindness is something you sell to the highest bidder." He could feel his hands shaking, balled them into fists at his sides. "So put your checkbook away. You want to thank me? Just say thank you and walk out that door when your car gets here. That's payment enough." Sloane stared at him like he'd just spoken a foreign language. Her pen had gone still over the check, her whole body frozen in a moment of perfect uncertainty. "I don't understand," she said finally, quietly. "I know you don't. That's the saddest part." The silence that fell between them was heavy, loaded with things neither of them quite knew how to say. Sloane slowly, carefully, closed her checkbook and put it back in her pocket. The pen disappeared wherever it had come from. "I'm sorry," she said, and sounded like she meant it. "I didn't mean to insult you." "Yeah, well," Caleb ran a hand through his hair, suddenly exhausted. "You didn't know better. Different worlds, right?" "Different worlds," she echoed. They didn't speak much after that. Sloane retreated to the guest room to wait for her car. Caleb washed the dishes, wiped down the counters, tried to ignore the strange ache in his chest that he couldn't quite name. When the black sedan pulled up outside, sleek and expensive, so out of place on his street it might as well have been a spaceship, Sloane emerged in her cleaned clothes, looking more like herself despite the bandage on her forehead. She paused at the door, turned back to him. "Caleb?" "Yeah?" "Thank you. For seeing me as a person who needed help, not an opportunity." She held his gaze. "I won't forget it." And then she was gone, sliding into the back of the sedan and disappearing down the street, leaving Caleb standing in his doorway, wondering if any of the last 12 hours had actually happened. What? Life went back to normal after that. Caleb picked up Lily from school, made dinner from whatever was in the pantry, helped her with homework at the kitchen table. He took odd jobs fixing furnaces and water heaters, always charging fair prices, usually getting paid in cash or checks that took days to clear. He juggled bills, put off the ones that could wait, paid the ones that couldn't. Normal, familiar. His life. Except he couldn't stop thinking about Sloane. Not in a romantic way, or at least he told himself it wasn't romantic. He just kept remembering things. The way she'd looked so lost in his kitchen, wearing his t-shirt, the shock in her eyes when he'd refused her money, the quiet intensity of her voice when she'd thanked him. Different worlds. Yeah, they were from different worlds. She'd probably already forgotten him, moved on with her important life, dealing with whatever important business people like her dealt with. The whole incident was probably just a strange blip in her otherwise orderly existence. Caleb was fine with that. He was. 3 days after the accident, Mrs. Chen showed up at his door with her tablet, her face pale. "Caleb," she said, "you should see this." She pulled up a news article, turned the screen to face him. The headline read, Ashford Industries CEO Sloan Ashford missing following car accident. Caleb's heart stopped. There was a photo, a professional headshot, Sloan in a sharp business suit, her hair perfectly styled, looking every inch the powerful executive. But it was definitely her. The same sharp eyes, the same high cheekbones, the same full lips. "Oh my God," Caleb breathed. "Keep reading," Mrs. Chen said grimly. The article explained that Sloan Ashford, 36, CEO of Ashford Industries, one of the largest tech conglomerates in the Pacific Northwest, had been reported missing after her car was found burned on a rural road outside Portland. Police were investigating. There were no signs of foul play, but also no sign of Ms. Ashford. Family and colleagues were deeply concerned. There was more. Details about her company, her net worth. Caleb's eyes nearly popped out of his head at the number. Her reputation as a ruthless but brilliant businesswoman. Photos of her at charity galas, corporate events, always poised, always perfect. "This is the woman you saved?" Mrs. Chen asked quietly. Yeah, that's her." "Caleb, do you know what this means? She's worth billions, billions, and you just let her walk out of here without what? Demanding a reward?" He shook his head, pushing the tablet back to Mrs. Chen. "I did the right thing. The right thing would be collecting a reward and using it to give Lily a better life. Or teaching Lily that some things are more important than money." Mrs. Chen sighed. "You're impossible, just like your father." She left, taking her tablet and her disappointment with her. Caleb stood in his doorway, staring out at the street where the black sedan had disappeared 3 days ago. Sloan Ashford, CEO, billionaire, and he'd given her coffee in a chipped mug and refused her check. Caleb started laughing, couldn't help it. The absurdity of it all, the cosmic joke. Of course, the woman he'd pulled from a burning car was one of the richest, most powerful people in the city. Of course she was. His laughter faded as he remembered her face when he'd refused her money. The genuine confusion, like she couldn't comprehend someone not wanting her wealth. Different worlds. He wondered if she'd see the news, see that she'd been missing, see the speculation and panic. He wondered if she'd tell anyone the truth, that a broke single dad had saved her and then kicked her out of his house for trying to pay him. Probably not. That story didn't fit the narrative of someone like Sloan Ashford. Caleb closed the door and went back to his life. 4 days later, Lily's school called. "Mr. Mercer, this is Principal Davidson. I need you to come pick up Lily." Caleb's heart dropped into his stomach. "Is she okay? Is she hurt?" "She's fine. She's not in trouble. But there's a situation. How quickly can you get here?" He made it to Riverside Elementary in 15 minutes, breaking at least 3 traffic laws and praying his truck wouldn't choose today to finally give up the ghost. His mind spun through possibilities. Had Lily gotten sick? Hurt? In a fight? The parking lot was strangely crowded for a Wednesday afternoon, and then Caleb saw it. A black sedan, long and sleek and expensive, parked right in front of the main entrance like it owned the place. Caleb's footsteps slowed. No, she wouldn't. She couldn't have, but he knew that car, would recognize it anywhere even though he'd only seen it once 4 days ago. Principal Davidson was waiting for him at the front entrance, wringing her hands, her normally composed face showing cracks of anxiety. "Mr. Mercer, thank God. There's a woman here to see you about Lily. She's very insistent." "Where is Lily?" "In my office with the woman. She seems fine, just confused. Mr. Mercer, is everything all right? This woman, she has security with her, and she's been asking very specific questions about your family situation." Caleb didn't wait to hear the rest. He pushed past the principal, through the halls he'd walked dozens of times for parent-teacher conferences and school plays, toward the administrative office. The door was open. Lily sat in one of the visitor chairs, swinging her legs and chatting animatedly with Sloan Ashford. Stood when Caleb entered, and he nearly didn't recognize her. This wasn't the woman who'd sat at his kitchen table in a borrowed t-shirt. This was the woman from the news articles. Sharp business suit, perfectly styled hair, an aura of controlled power that made even the principal's office feel smaller. But she still had the bandage on her forehead, visible beneath artfully arranged hair. Still had those same sharp, assessing eyes. "Mr. Mercer," she said formally. Thank you for coming. Daddy! Lily jumped down from the chair and ran to him. This is Miss Sloane. She said she knows you. She's really nice and she has a driver and everything. Caleb picked Lily up, holding her close, his eyes never leaving Sloane's face. Baby, go wait with Mrs. Davidson for a minute, okay? But please, Lily. Something in his tone made Lily nod seriously. She wriggled down and left the office, closing the door behind her with exaggerated care. The moment they were alone, Caleb turned on Sloane. What the hell are you doing here? I needed to see you. So you show up at my daughter's school? You couldn't have called? Come by the house? I don't have your number, and I wasn't sure you'd want to see me after... She gestured vaguely. After how we left things. So you thought terrifying my daughter's school and pulling her out of class was the better option? I didn't mean to cause a scene. Sloane had the grace to look uncomfortable. I just needed to talk to you, and I didn't know where else... What do you want, Sloane? She reached into her expensive leather bag, probably cost more than his truck, and pulled out a folder, set it on Principal Davidson's desk with careful precision. I want to give you something. I told you, I don't want your money. It's not money. She pushed the folder toward him. Open it. Caleb didn't want to. Every instinct told him that whatever was in that folder would change things, would complicate the simple, struggling life he'd built for himself and Lily. But curiosity won out. He opened the folder. Inside were documents. Legal documents, dense with text and official stamps. It took Caleb several seconds of reading before the words started making sense. Property deed, transfer of ownership, his address. His hands started shaking. What is this? I bought the building you're renting from, Sloane said quietly. The whole property, and I'm signing it over to you, free and clear. No mortgage, no rent, no strings, it's yours. Caleb's vision swam. He gripped the edge of the desk to steady himself. You can't do this. I already did. The paperwork is filed. I just need your signature to complete the transfer. Why? The word came out broken, desperate. Why would you do this? Sloane was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. Because you saved my life and didn't ask for anything in return. Because you refused my money and made me question everything I thought I understood about people. Boss, because I've spent the last 4 days thinking about you and Lily and this life you're building on pride and determination and love. She stepped closer. Because I grew up poor, Caleb. Dirt poor. I know what it's like to choose between food and heat, to wear the same shoes until they fall apart, to feel like you're one disaster away from losing everything. You're a billionaire. Now. But I wasn't always. I clawed my way up from nothing, and somewhere along the way I forgot what it felt like to be helpless, to need help, to accept it. Her eyes were bright, intense. You reminded me. When you pulled me from that car, when you brought me to your home, when you gave me your bed and refused my check, you reminded me what it means to be human. Caleb's throat felt tight. This is too much. It's not nearly enough. You gave me back something I'd lost. Let me give you something in return. This isn't... He looked down at the papers again, at the deed with his name on it. This feels like charity. It's not charity. It's recognition. You're raising a beautiful daughter on your own, working yourself to exhaustion, holding everything together through sheer will. You deserve stability. You deserve to not worry about rent. You deserve... Her voice cracked slightly. You deserve someone to help carry the load. Caleb closed his eyes. Behind his lids he could see it, a future where he owned his home, where Lily had security, where he could breathe without constantly calculating which bills could wait another week. It would solve everything. It would also change everything. I can't accept this, he said, even as his heart broke saying it. Sloane's face fell. Why not? Because... He struggled to find the words. Because if I take this, I become exactly what people will think I am. The guy who saved a rich woman and got paid for it. The guy who used his daughter to manipulate sympathy. The guy who accepted help when it was offered, Sloane interrupted firmly. Who put his pride aside for his daughter's future. Who was brave enough to let someone care. They stared at each other across the principal's desk, the folder of documents between them like a bridge and a barrier all at once. "Please," Sloane said quietly. "Let me do this. Not for me, for Lily." And there it was, the one argument Caleb couldn't fight. For Lily. His hand shook as he picked up the pen Sloane offered, as he signed his name on the designated lines, making it real, making it permanent. His house, his property, his security. When it was done, Sloane carefully gathered the papers, slipped them back into the folder. "There's one more thing," she said. Caleb let out a strangled laugh. "What? You buying me a car too?" "No, but I'm starting a charitable foundation for single parents struggling to make ends meet. People like you, like I used to be." She met his eyes. "I want to call it the Mercer Fund, and I want you to help me run it." The world tilted sideways. "What?" "You know what people need because you've lived it. You understand the difference between charity and dignity because you refuse to compromise yours. I need that perspective. I need someone who will make sure we're actually helping, not just throwing money at problems." Sloane's intensity was back, focused entirely on him. "I need someone who will tell me no when I'm wrong. Someone who won't be dazzled by my money or intimidated by my reputation. Someone who sees me as a person first." "You barely know me. I know enough. I know you risked your life for a stranger. I know you refused payment when you clearly needed it. I know you're raising an incredible daughter and doing it with grace and strength I can only admire." She paused. "And I know that the world needs more people like you in positions to make a difference." Caleb's mind was reeling. From property deeds to charitable foundations, from a quiet life of struggle to, what? Partnership with a billionaire? "I need time to think about this." "Take all the time you need. The foundation won't launch for at least 6 months. There's groundwork to lay first." Sloane handed him a business card, sleek and minimal. "But think about it. Please." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Caleb, thank you for everything." And then she was gone, leaving him standing in Principal Davidson's office, holding a folder that represented security and a business card that represented possibility, wondering how his simple life had gotten so complicated in the space of a week. Lily appeared in the doorway, eyes wide with curiosity. "Daddy, what did Miss Sloane want?" Caleb looked down at his daughter, his reason for getting up every morning, his motivation to keep fighting when things got hard, his whole world condensed into 70 pounds of energy and innocence. "She wanted to help us, baby." "Are you going to let her?" Such a simple question, such a complicated answer. "I don't know yet," Caleb admitted. "What do you think I should do?" Lily considered this with the seriousness she applied to all important decisions. "Mommy used to say that when someone offers you a hand, you should take it, because we all need help sometimes." Caleb's eyes burned. Sarah had said that in those final weeks, had made him promise to accept help, to not let pride stand in the way of Lily's future. He knelt down, pulling his daughter into a tight hug. "Your mom was a smart lady." "The smartest," Lily agreed, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "Does this mean we get to keep our house?" "Yeah, baby, we get to keep our house." Lily pulled back, her face splitting into a gap-toothed grin that made Caleb's heart squeeze. "Good. Because I like my room, and Mrs. Chen lives next door and she makes the best cookies." Caleb laughed, messy and relieved and overwhelmed all at once. That night, after Lily was asleep, Caleb sat at his kitchen table, his table in his house that he owned, and pulled out Sloane's business card, the Mercer Fund. He thought about all the families like his, struggling and scraping by, held together by determination and love, but always one crisis away from disaster. He thought about what it would mean to help them, to be part of something bigger than his own survival. He thought about Sloane's eyes when she talked about her past, about the vulnerability beneath all that polished power. Different worlds, he'd thought, but maybe they weren't so different after all, just two people who'd learned to survive, who'd built walls to protect themselves, who'd forgotten, or never learned, how to let others in. Caleb picked up his phone. He didn't have her number, but the card had an email address. He could write to her, let her know he was thinking about her offer, that he... His phone buzzed before he could finish the thought. A text from an unknown number. "Did you mean it? When you said dignity first, always?" Caleb stared at the message. Somehow, he knew it was her. He typed back, "Yes, no exceptions." The response came quickly. "Then we'll do this right." Partners? Caleb looked around his kitchen, at the crayon drawings on the fridge, at the chipped mugs in the sink, at the life he'd built from nothing and determination. He thought about Lily, asleep in her room, safe and secure for the first time in years. He thought about Sarah's words, about taking help when it was offered. He typed, "Partners. But I have conditions. Name them." And just like that, sitting in his tiny kitchen at midnight, Caleb Mercer started negotiating with a billionaire about how to change the world, or at least how to help people like him survive it. The coffee had gone cold in Caleb's mug by the time he finally sent the last message to Sloan at 2 a.m. His conditions had been simple but non-negotiable. Any family helped by the Mercer Fund would be treated with respect, not pity. No photo ops, no press releases featuring struggling parents as props. No handouts that created dependency instead of opportunity. Every dollar spent had to come with dignity attached. Sloan's response had been immediate despite the late hour. "I wouldn't want it any other way." Now, 3 weeks later, Caleb stood in a glass-walled conference room on the 34th floor of the Ashford Industries building, feeling like an imposter in his best shirt, which was still obviously cheap compared to the tailored suits surrounding him. "Mr. Mercer, your thoughts on the proposed scholarship structure?" Caleb blinked, pulled back to the present by Marcus Chen, Sloan's assistant, and apparently the only other person in the room who didn't look at him like he was a stray dog that had wandered into a boardroom. The man was 50-ish, sharp-eyed, with the kind of efficient competence that suggested he'd been keeping Sloan's life organized for decades. "I think it's missing the point," Caleb said, and felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. Across the table, Gerald Whitmore, VP of Operations, and the kind of man who wore his Ivy League education like armor, set down his fountain pen with deliberate precision. "I'm sorry?" "The scholarship fund, as you've outlined it, only helps kids who are already on track for college. What about the ones who won't make it that far because they're working part-time jobs to help their parents pay rent? What about the ones whose test scores suffer because they're hungry or stressed or taking care of younger siblings?" Caleb leaned forward, warming to his argument despite the hostile stares. "You're helping the almost-made-its. I'm talking about the barely hanging-ons." "That's not fiscally responsible," Whitmore said coldly. "We need to show measurable returns on investment, college graduation rates, career placement, quantifiable success metrics." "People aren't investments," Caleb interrupted, and heard someone gasp. "They're people. And if we're only helping the ones who are already going to succeed, then we're not actually changing anything." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Whitmore's face had gone an interesting shade of red. The other executives, 5 of them, all expensively dressed and radiating disapproval, exchanged looks that clearly said, "Who is this guy and why is he here?" Then Sloan spoke for the first time since the meeting had started. "He's right." Every head swiveled toward her. She sat at the head of the table in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Caleb's truck, her hair pulled back in a severe bun that somehow made her look both intimidating and elegant. The bandage was gone from her forehead now, replaced by a thin scar that she hadn't bothered to conceal with makeup. "Ms. Ashford," Whitmore began, "with all due respect—" "Caleb is right," Sloan repeated, her voice cutting through the protest like a blade. "We're building this foundation to help people who are actually struggling, not to pad our success statistics. If that means messier metrics and harder outcomes to measure, so be it." She turned those sharp gray eyes on each executive in turn. "Anyone who has a problem with that approach can leave now." No one moved, though Whitmore looked like he'd swallowed something bitter. "Good. Marcus, rework the scholarship structure based on Caleb's input. I want a new proposal by Friday." Sloan stood, effectively ending the meeting. "Dismissed." The exodus was swift and silent, executives filing out with tight faces and rigid shoulders. Whitmore shot Caleb a look of pure loathing on his way past. When they were alone, Sloan allowed herself a small smile. "You made an enemy today." "Yeah, well, he seems like he was already predisposed to hate me." "True. Gerald doesn't think much of my decision to bring in an outside consultant with no business experience." She walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Portland, the city spread out below like a circuit board of lights and motion. He thinks even less of the fact that I'm listening to you over people with MBAs from Harvard. But Caleb joined her at the window, keeping a respectful distance. Are you having second thoughts? No. She glanced at him, and there was something fierce in her expression. You said what needed to be said. That's exactly why I need you here. To piss off your executives? To keep me honest. Sloane turned fully to face him, and Caleb was struck again by how different she seemed in this environment. Here, in her glass tower, she was all edges and control. But sometimes, like now, when she let her guard drop for just a moment, he caught glimpses of the woman who'd sat in his kitchen wearing a borrowed t-shirt, lost and vulnerable. It's easy to lose sight of the mission when you're surrounded by people who only speak in quarterly returns and market projections. You remind me why we're doing this. Before Caleb could respond, Marcus appeared in the doorway. Ms. Ashford, your 3 o'clock is here, and your mother called again. Something flickered across Sloane's face. There and gone so fast, Caleb almost missed it. Tell her I'm in meetings all day. I did. She said she'd wait in your office. Sloane's jaw tightened. Of course she did. Marcus disappeared as efficiently as he'd arrived. Sloane stood very still, staring out the window like she was gathering strength for battle. Family issues? Caleb ventured. You could say that. She smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her suit jacket. My mother has opinions about how I should be running my life, and my company, and apparently now my charitable endeavors. Sounds familiar. Mrs. Chen has opinions about everything I do. Yes, but Mrs. Chen actually cares about you. My mother cares about the Ashford name and the size of her quarterly dividend check. The bitterness in Sloane's voice was sharp enough to draw blood. She heard about the foundation and decided it was her business to approve or disapprove. Caleb thought about his own mother, gone now for 15 years, who'd worked 2 jobs to keep him fed and still found time to help neighbors who needed it, who taught him that wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts but in the people who showed up when things got hard. You don't need her approval, he said quietly. Sloane looked at him, surprise evident in her features. No, I suppose I don't. Then after a pause, would you like to meet her? Might be illuminating to see where I came from. Is that a good idea? Probably not, but watching her try to make sense of you might be the most entertaining thing that happens all week. Against his better judgment, Caleb found himself following Sloane down the corridor to her office, a space that was somehow both luxurious and austere, all clean lines and expensive minimalism. And sitting in one of the guest chairs, examining her manicure with studied disinterest, was a woman who could only be Sloane's mother. Victoria Ashford was 60-something and fighting it with every weapon money could buy. Her face was tight and smooth in that way that suggested regular appointments with expensive doctors. Her clothes were immaculate, her jewelry understated but clearly worth a fortune. And when she looked up at Sloane's entrance, her eyes were the same sharp gray blue as her daughter's, but colder somehow, calculating. Sloane, darling, finally. Her gaze slid to Caleb, and he felt himself being assessed and found wanting in the space of a heartbeat. And you've brought a friend. Mother, this is Caleb Mercer. He's consulting on the new foundation. Caleb, my mother, Victoria Ashford. Caleb extended his hand. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Ashford. Victoria's handshake was limp and brief. The kind that suggested physical contact with him was vaguely distasteful. Mercer, how interesting. You're the inspiration for this little charity project, aren't you? I'm working with Sloane to develop programs that actually help struggling families, Caleb said evenly. How noble! Victoria turned back to her daughter. Darling, we need to talk about this foundation nonsense. The board is concerned. The board doesn't get a vote on how I spend my personal fortune. Don't be naive. Everything you do reflects on the company. And this, Victoria gestured vaguely at Caleb, this bleeding heart crusade is making investors nervous. They want to know you're focused on growth, not on throwing money at people who won't appreciate it. Caleb felt his hands curl into fists. With all due respect, Mrs. Ashford. You're absolutely right, Mother, Sloane interrupted smoothly, and Caleb's head whipped toward her in shock. She was smiling, but there was steel underneath. This foundation is making people nervous. Good. It should. It's challenging the narrative that wealth is some kind of meritocracy, That people at the bottom deserve to be there because they didn't work hard enough. It's uncomfortable. Change always is. Victoria's eyes narrowed. You're being deliberately difficult. I'm being authentic. There's a difference. Sloane moved behind her desk, a clear power move. Now, if you'll excuse me, Mother, I have actual work to do. Marcus will see you out. It was a dismissal so smooth and final that even Victoria seemed momentarily at a loss. She stood slowly, gathering her designer handbag with precise movements. You're making a mistake, Sloane. This man, she glanced at Caleb with barely concealed disdain, is going to drag you down to his level. And when he's gotten whatever he wants from you, you'll be left with nothing but scandal and regret. Or, Caleb said quietly, surprising himself, maybe she's bringing herself back to a level where she can actually see people who need help. Maybe that's not down, Mrs. Ashford. Maybe it's up. The look Victoria gave him could have frozen fire. Then she swept from the room without another word, leaving a wake of expensive perfume and cold fury. Caleb turned to Sloane, who was staring at him with an unreadable expression. I'm sorry, he said. I shouldn't have. Don't apologize. Sloane's voice was rough. That was the most honest thing anyone said to my mother in probably 3 decades. She sank into her desk chair, suddenly looking exhausted. And she's not wrong, you know, about the scandal. People are already talking. What kind of talking? The kind where a billionaire CEO suddenly befriends a struggling single father and starts throwing money around. The narrative practically writes itself. Sloane rubbed her temples. There's a blog post making the rounds. Ice Queen finds her heart, checkbook follows. Very creative. Do you care what they say? I shouldn't, but... She looked up at him, and there was something vulnerable in her eyes. This is my reputation we're talking about. My credibility. If people think this foundation is just some vanity project or PR stunt, we lose the ability to actually help anyone. Caleb pulled out the chair across from her desk and sat down without being invited. Then we prove them wrong. How? By doing exactly what we said we'd do. By helping people with dignity and respect. By showing results that matter, not just numbers on a spreadsheet, but actual lives changed. He leaned forward. Let them talk, Sloane. Let them write their snarky blog posts and make their assumptions. The work will speak for itself. She studied him for a long moment. You really believe that? I have to, because if I let every person who judged me for being poor or struggling or doing things differently stop me from doing what's right, I'd never get out of bed in the morning. A smile ghosted across Sloane's lips. You're infuriatingly optimistic, you know that? Someone has to balance out your cynicism. The tension in the room eased slightly. Sloane pulled out her laptop, and they spent the next 2 hours hammering out details for the Foundation's first pilot program, a rent assistance initiative that would help families stay housed during temporary crises. No applications, no means testing that required people to prove they were deserving enough. Just help, offered quickly and without judgment. It was past 7 when Caleb finally checked his phone and saw 3 missed calls from Mrs. Chen. I have to go, he said, standing quickly. Lily, of course, go. Sloane stood as well. Same time next week? Yeah. And Sloane? He paused at the door. Your mother's wrong. About all of it. I know, but thank you for saying it anyway. Caleb made it home in record time, bursting through the front door to find Lily and Mrs. Chen having a very serious tea party at the kitchen table, complete with the plastic tea set Lily had gotten for her 6th birthday. Daddy! Lily jumped up, nearly knocking over her plastic teacup. You're late! Mrs. Chen said we had to start tea without you. I'm sorry, baby. Work ran long. He scooped her up, breathing in the familiar smell of her strawberry shampoo. Did you save me any cookies? Maybe, she giggled, if you say the magic word. Please? Nope, the other magic word. Lily is the most wonderful daughter in the whole world? That's more than one word, but okay. She squirmed down and ran to get the cookie jar. Mrs. Chen stood, gathering her things with practiced efficiency. She had dinner, finished her homework, and only asked to watch TV 12 times instead of the usual 15. I consider it a win. Thank you for everything. How was the meeting with the dragon lady? Caleb blinked. How did you know about that? Please. I Googled your billionaire friend after she showed up at Lily's school. Victoria Ashford is, well, let's just say the apple fell very far from that particular tree, and we should all be grateful for it. After Mrs. Chen left, Caleb helped Lily get ready for bed, reading her favorite story about a girl who tamed dragons and built a library. As he tucked her in, Lily grabbed his hand. Daddy, are you going to keep working with Miss Sloane? Yeah, baby. Why? Some kids at school said their parents said mean things about you, about Miss Sloane giving you money because you're pretty or something. She wrinkled her nose. That's silly. You're my daddy, not pretty. You're handsome. Caleb's heart clenched. What did you tell them? I said Miss Sloane is helping us help other people, and if they got a problem with that, they can go sit on a cactus. She said it so matter-of-factly that Caleb had to suppress a laugh. Lily, we've talked about the cactus thing. I know. But Daddy, why do people care so much about what you do? How to explain adult cruelty to a 7-year-old. How to make her understand that people needed villains in their stories, and sometimes they cast whoever was convenient. Because change is scary, Shashke, he said finally. And when people see something different, something they don't understand, sometimes they make up stories to make sense of it, even if those stories aren't true. That's dumb. Yeah, baby, it really is. Are you going to stop because of the dumb people? Caleb thought about Sloane in her glass tower, fighting her own battles against people who thought compassion was a weakness. He thought about all the families like his who needed help, but were too proud or too scared to ask for it. He thought about Sarah in those final weeks, making him promise to live fully, to love openly, to not let fear make him small. No, he said firmly. I'm not going to stop. Good. Lily yawned, her eyes already drooping. Miss Sloane needs you. You make her smile different. Different how? But Lily was already asleep, her breathing evening out into the gentle rhythm of childhood dreams. Caleb sat there for a long moment, watching his daughter sleep, feeling the weight of responsibility and possibility pressing down on his shoulders in equal measure. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Caleb was replacing the battery in Mrs. Chen's smoke detector when a sleek silver Mercedes pulled up in front of his house. The man who emerged was tall, 40-ish, with the kind of calculated casual look that only came from expensive stylists pretending to be effortless. Caleb Mercer? That's me. Derek Ashford, Sloane's brother. He extended a hand, his smile polished and empty. Mind if we talk? Everything in Caleb's gut said this was a bad idea, but he climbed down from the ladder and invited Derek inside, because turning away Sloane's family seemed like it would cause more problems than it solved. Derek settled onto the couch, the same couch where Sloane had slept 3 weeks ago, and looked around with the kind of assessment that made Caleb want to punch him. Cozy, Derek said, in a tone that meant anything but. What do you want, Mr. Ashford? Please call me Derek. We're practically family now, aren't we? Given how close you and my sister have become. His smile never reached his eyes. That's actually why I'm here. I wanted to meet the man who's been taking up so much of Sloane's time and attention. I'm consulting on her foundation. Right, the foundation. Derek leaned back, perfectly at ease in Caleb's shabby living room. Let me be direct, Caleb. My sister is brilliant but naive when it comes to people. She wants to see the best in everyone, wants to believe that kindness is always reciprocated. It's admirable. It's also dangerous. What's your point? My point is that I've seen men like you before. Working class, struggling, just trying to make ends meet. And then suddenly a wealthy woman enters the picture and opportunities start appearing. A house here, a consulting position there. Maybe eventually a romantic relationship, a wedding, access to real money. Derek's voice was smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. I'm not judging. It's a smart play. But I want you to understand something. If you hurt my sister, if you embarrass her or use her or break her trust in any way, I will destroy you. Caleb felt heat rising in his chest, spreading through his limbs. Get out. Excuse me? I said get out of my house. Caleb stood, his voice deadly quiet. I don't care if you're Sloane's brother or the King of England. You come into my home and accuse me of being a gold digger, imply I'm running some kind of con? We're done talking. Derek stood as well, but he was still smiling that empty smile. I'm just looking out for family. No, you're looking out for yourself, because if Sloane's focused on helping people, she's not focused on whatever it is you want from her. Caleb moved toward the door, opening it pointedly. Sloane's smarter than you give her credit for, and she's tougher than you think. She doesn't need you to protect her from me. Everyone needs protection from something, Caleb. Even you. Derek paused at the door. How's your daughter, by the way? Lily, right? Cute kid. Be a shame if this whole situation affected her negatively. Kids can be so cruel when their parents are the subject of scandal. The threat was veiled but unmistakable. Caleb's hands shook with the effort of not putting his fist through Derek's perfect teeth. If you go anywhere near my daughter, relax. I'm just making conversation. Derek pulled out a business card, set it on the hall table. If you change your mind about taking a payout and walking away quietly, call me. I'm prepared to be very generous. More generous than my sister, probably. No strings, no foundations, just cash and a clean break. Then he was gone, sliding into his Mercedes and disappearing down the street like a snake returning to its hole. Caleb stood in his doorway, breathing hard, the business card burning a hole in his peripheral vision. He should tell Sloane, should warn her that her own brother was trying to buy him off, threatening his daughter. But something held him back. Some instinct that said this would start a war in Sloane's family, and she didn't need that on top of everything else she was dealing with. He picked up Derek's card, walked to the kitchen, and fed it into the garbage disposal. Watched it get shredded into nothing, the grinding noise satisfying in its finality. When Lily came home from school that afternoon, Caleb held her a little tighter than usual.
Daddy, you're squishing me. Sorry, baby. Just love you is all. Love you too. Can we have pizza for dinner?
Sure thing. Because whatever games Sloane's family wanted to play, whatever scandals the gossip blogs wanted to manufacture, Caleb's priorities were clear. Keep Lily safe. Do the work that mattered. And maybe, if he was very careful, figure out why the thought of walking away from Sloane Ashford made his chest tight with something that felt suspiciously like grief. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Caleb's phone buzzed with a text from Sloane. My brother visited you today. Caleb stared at the message. Of course she knew. She probably had people watching Derek, or maybe Derek had gone straight to her after leaving. Either way, there was no point in lying. Yes. What did he offer you? Money to disappear, threats disguised as concern. The phone rang immediately. Caleb answered. I'm sorry. Sloane's voice was tight with controlled fury. He had no right. He's scared, Caleb interrupted. Of you changing, of losing control over you. People do stupid things when they're scared. That's very generous of you, considering he threatened your daughter. He implied a threat. There's a difference. Caleb walked to his window, staring out at the quiet street. Sloane, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. All right. Is this foundation, this partnership we're building, is it going to put a target on Lily's back? Because if it is, I need to know now. She's my line, Sloane. The one I won't cross. The one I'll burn everything else to protect. Silence on the other end. Then softly. I can have security assigned to her. Discreetly. Just to be safe. That's not an answer to my question. The honest answer? I don't know. Sloane's voice cracked slightly. I don't know what my family is capable of when they feel threatened. I don't know how far the gossip and speculation will go. I don't know if we can do this work without consequences. Caleb closed his eyes. Okay. Okay. Okay, as in, at least you're being honest. At least you're not making promises you can't keep. He took a breath. I'm not walking away, Sloane. Not from the foundation, not from this partnership. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. If things get dangerous, if the threats become real, you let me know immediately. No protecting me from the truth, no shielding me because you think I can't handle it. We're partners, which means we deal with problems together. Deal? Deal. A pause. Caleb? Yeah? Thank you for not taking Derek's offer, for not running when things got complicated. Where would I run to? This is my life now, for better or worse. I hope it's better. Me too. After they hung up, Caleb sat in the darkness of his living room, his house settling around him with familiar creaks and sighs. Through the wall, he could hear Mrs. Chen's television, some late-night talk show providing ambient company. Outside, Portland slept under a blanket of winter cold. Tomorrow, he'd go back to Sloan's glass tower and fight more battles with executives who thought compassion was inefficient. He'd field more judgmental looks and whispered speculation about his motives. He'd wonder, as he did every day, if he was doing the right thing, if the risk was worth the potential reward. But tonight, in the house that was finally truly his, with his daughter safe in her room and the promise of meaningful work ahead, Caleb felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the desperate, clinging hope of someone barely surviving, but the solid, grounded hope of someone building something that might actually matter, something that might actually help, something worth fighting for. And if Sloan's family, the gossip blogs, and the whole damn city wanted to stand in the way of that, well, they were about to learn that poor didn't mean weak, and kindness didn't mean pushover. Caleb Mercer had survived losing his wife, raising a daughter alone, scraping by on pride and repair work. He'd survived pulling a stranger from a burning car and refusing to profit from mercy. He could survive this too. The question was, could Sloan? Could she handle the weight of her family's disapproval, the pressure of public scrutiny, the risk of everything she'd built crumbling because she chose to care? Time would tell. But as Caleb finally headed to bed, he found himself hoping, fiercely, irrationally, that when the real test came, they'd both be strong enough to pass them. Together. The real test came sooner than either of them expected. 2 months into the Foundation's pilot program, Caleb was in his truck heading to fix a busted water heater when his phone lit up with an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pull over. "Is this Caleb Mercer?" The voice was female, young, trembling with barely contained emotion. "Yeah, who's this?" "My name is Jennifer Oakes. I'm calling about the Mercer Fund. I saw the information at my daughter's school and Her voice broke. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't be calling. This is stupid." Hey, it's okay," Caleb said quickly, his repair instincts kicking in, the ones that knew how to gentle people who were on the edge of breaking. "Take your breath. Tell me what's going on." What came out was a story Caleb knew too well. Jennifer was a single mother of 2, working full-time at a grocery store while trying to finish her nursing degree at night. Her ex-husband had stopped paying child support 6 months ago. Her car had died last week, and without it, she couldn't get to work, couldn't get to class, couldn't keep any of the fragile pieces of her life from scattering. She was 3 weeks from eviction, 2 days from losing her job, and had called the Mercer Fund as a last desperate hope before giving up entirely. "Can you help me?" she whispered. The website said no applications, no judgment, just help. But that can't be real, can it? Nothing's that simple. Caleb's throat felt tight. "Give me your address. I'll be there in 20 minutes." He called Sloan while driving, explained the situation in clipped sentences. By the time he pulled up to Jennifer's apartment, a tired building in a tired neighborhood that could have been his own, Sloan had already arranged for an emergency fund transfer, a rental car for the week, and an appointment with a mechanic who did work for Ashford Industries at cost. Jennifer opened the door looking like she'd been crying for hours. 2 kids peeked out from behind her legs, maybe 5 and 7, with that particular wariness that came from watching adults struggle. "I'm Caleb," he said gently, "from the Mercer Fund. Can I come in?" What followed was one of the hardest and most important conversations of Caleb's life. He sat at Jennifer's kitchen table, so similar to his own, down to the chipped mugs and crayon drawings, and explained what the fund could do. Rent assistance for 3 months while she got stable, car repair costs covered, a small grocery stipend, childcare vouchers so she could finish her degree without the kids being alone. Jennifer kept waiting for the catch, kept asking what she had to do in return, what strings were attached. And every time, Caleb said the same thing. No strings. Just a requirement that when you're stable, when you're on your feet, you find a way to help someone else who's struggling. That's it. That's the whole deal. She broke down crying, and her kids started crying, and Caleb had to step outside for a minute because he was crying too, remembering what it felt like to be that desperate, that hopeless, that certain that nobody cared. When he finally made it back to his truck, he sat in the driver's seat with shaking hands and called Sloan. "How did it go?" she asked immediately. It went, Caleb said roughly. God, Sloan, you should have seen her face. Like we'd handed her a life raft in the middle of drowning. That's exactly what we did. I know, He scrubbed a hand over his face. I forgot what this feels like. Actually helping someone. Not just talking about helping or planning to help. Actually doing it. We're going to do a lot more of it. Sloane's voice was warm, and Caleb could hear the smile in it. Marcus told me we've had 47 calls today, 47 families reaching out, asking if this is real, if we really mean it. Do we have the funding for 47 families? We have funding for 400 families, Caleb, and if we run out, I'll add more. A pause. This is what money should do. This is what it's for. That night, Caleb came home to find Mrs. Chen on his porch with her tablet again, but this time she was smiling. You should see this, she said, pulling up a local news article. The headline read, New Foundation Helps Struggling Families Without Red Tape Judgment. The article detailed the Mercer Fund's approach. No lengthy applications, no means testing, no requirements to prove you were deserving enough of help. Just quick, dignified assistance for families in crisis. It quoted Jennifer Oakes, who'd apparently spoken to a reporter with permission from the fund, describing how she'd been on the verge of homelessness until a single phone call changed everything. At the bottom was a photo of Sloan at some charity event, looking polished and powerful. The caption read, Sloan Ashford, CEO of Ashford Industries, brings personal touch to philanthropy. No mention of you, Mrs. Chen observed. Good. That's how it should be. Humble doesn't pay the bills, Caleb. No, but it lets me sleep at night. Mrs. Chen patted his cheek affectionately. Your mother would be proud. Stubborn, but proud. Over the next few weeks, the Mercer Fund became something neither Caleb nor Sloan had quite anticipated. A movement. What started as a pilot program for 20 families exploded into hundreds of requests, thousands of calls, a waiting list that grew by the hour. Local news picked up the story, then regional outlets, then national ones. Suddenly, Caleb couldn't go to the grocery store without someone recognizing him from the background of photos. Couldn't pick up Lily from school without other parents approaching him with questions, suggestions, their own stories of struggle. He'd become accidentally famous, and he hated every second of it. Sloan, meanwhile, was being pulled in two directions. The foundation was succeeding beyond their wildest expectations, but it was also drawing fire from exactly the people Derek had warned about. Conservative pundits called it welfare with a PR team. Progressive critics said it was a billionaire's tax dodge. Her own board of directors sent increasingly stern letters about brand alignment and shareholder concerns. They met for coffee one rainy Thursday morning at a small cafe far from downtown, far from cameras and curious eyes. Sloan looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes despite expertly applied concealer. I'm losing the board, she said without preamble. Gerald's organizing a vote to remove me as CEO. Caleb's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. He can do that? If he gets enough votes, yes. He's arguing that I'm distracted, that the foundation is damaging the company's reputation, that my judgment is compromised. She laughed bitterly. That last part is code for she's spending too much time with the poor handyman and losing sight of what matters. So shut it down. Sloan's head snapped up. What? The foundation. If it's going to cost you your company, shut it down. We helped some people. That's more than most billionaires do. You can walk away with your head high. Absolutely not. Sloan, no, Caleb, I'm not shutting down the one meaningful thing I've done in a decade because Gerald Whitmore and my snake of a brother think profit margins are more important than human lives. Her eyes blazed with fierce determination. I'd rather lose the company than lose this. You don't mean that. I absolutely mean it. Ashford Industries will survive without me. It's a machine, and machines keep running regardless of who's at the controls. But the Mercer Fund? The families we're helping? They need this. They need us. She reached across the table, grabbed his hand. I need this. You showed me there was more to life than quarterly earnings and market share. I'm not going back to that empty existence. Caleb stared at their joined hands, at the contrast between her manicured nails and his work-roughened fingers. What if we lose everything? Then we lose it together, and we start over.
Sloan squeezed his hand. I'm not afraid of being poor again, Caleb. I'm afraid of being the person I was before I met you, cold and isolated and convinced that money could insulate me from having to care about anyone. Something shifted in that moment, something neither of them had quite acknowledged until now. The air between them felt charged, heavy, with possibility and danger in equal measure. Caleb pulled his hand back slowly. We should get back to work. Right, work. But Sloane's eyes lingered on his face a moment too long, and Caleb felt heat climb up his neck. The board meeting happened on a gray Monday morning that felt appropriate for executions. Sloane had asked Caleb not to come, said it would be better if he stayed out of it, but he'd shown up anyway and planted himself in the waiting area outside the conference room like a stubborn ghost. Marcus found him there 2 hours later looking grim. They voted her out. Caleb felt the floor drop from under him. What? Gerald had the votes, 16-9. She's no longer CEO of Ashford Industries. Marcus sat down heavily in the chair next to Caleb. She's in there now, packing her office. I need to see her. Mr. Mercer, I don't think... But Caleb was already moving, striding past Marcus and through the heavy doors into the executive suite. He found Sloane in her office, methodically placing personal items into a cardboard box. Her hands were steady, her face composed, but Caleb could see the fracture lines around her eyes. You shouldn't be here, she said without looking up. Neither should you. This is your company. Was my company, past tense. She picked up a photo frame, her at some ribbon-cutting ceremony, smiling that polished public smile, and set it in the box. Turns out board members don't appreciate CEOs who prioritize people over profits. Who knew? Sloane, don't. Her voice cracked slightly. Don't tell me it's going to be okay, or that this is for the best, or any of the other platitudes people say when someone loses everything. Just don't. Caleb crossed to her, gently took the box from her hands, and set it on the desk. Then he did something he'd been wanting to do for weeks but hadn't allowed himself. He pulled her into a hug. For a moment she stood rigid, resistant. Then something broke and she collapsed against him, her face buried in his shoulder, her whole body shaking with silent sobs. I'm sorry, Caleb murmured into her hair. This is my fault. The foundation, bringing me in, all of it. Stop, Sloane said fiercely, pulling back to look at him with red-rimmed eyes. This is the best thing I've ever done. Losing a CEO position isn't the same as losing what matters. I know that now. She wiped at her eyes impatiently. Besides, do you know how much money I made when they forced me out? The severance package, the stock options I'm cashing out? Enough to fund the Mercer Fund for the next 20 years minimum. Despite everything, Caleb felt a laugh bubble up. You're insane. Probably, but I'm free. Sloane's smile was watery but genuine. For the first time in my adult life, I don't have to answer to anyone. I can focus completely on the foundation, on actually helping people. She trailed off, looking at him with an expression that made Caleb's breath catch. On what? On figuring out what else I want, who else I want. Her hand came up to touch his cheek, feather-light and tentative. Caleb, The door burst open and Derek strode in, his face flushed with triumph. Well, well, the fallen queen and her pet project. His eyes landed on how close they were standing, how Sloane's hand was still touching Caleb's face, and his smile turned vicious. How touching, literally. Sloane dropped her hand but didn't step back. What do you want, Derek? To offer my congratulations, of course. You've successfully torpedoed your career for a charity case and a man who's clearly using you for money. He turned that empty smile on Caleb. I'm impressed, actually. I offered you cash to disappear, but you went for the long game. Get her fired, isolated from the family, dependent on you for validation. Very clever. Get out, Sloane said coldly. This is my building now, dear sister. Technically, you're the one who needs to leave. Derek picked up the photo frame she'd been packing, examined it with mock interest. You know what the saddest part is? You actually believe he cares about you, that this is real. But the moment your money runs out, the moment you can't fund his little foundation anymore, he'll disappear. They always do. Caleb had spent most of his adult life avoiding violence. He'd walked away from fights, swallowed his pride, turned the other cheek because he had Lily to think about.
A daughter who needed a father who didn't end up in jail for assault. But standing there, watching Derek try to poison the one good thing that had happened to either of them, Caleb felt his control slip. "You want to know the truth?" he said quietly, and something in his tone made Derek's smirk falter. "I didn't want Sloane's money. Didn't want this position, didn't want any of it. I wanted to pull a stranger from a burning car and go back to my simple life. But your sister? She's the most stubborn, infuriating, brilliant person I've ever met, and she refused to let me disappear into obscurity. She dragged me into this mess because she actually gives a damn about people, which is apparently a foreign concept in your family. How dare you? I'm not finished." Caleb stepped forward, and despite being roughly the same height, he somehow seemed to loom over Derek. "You think I'm using her? I've turned down every financial offer she's made except the house, and that was only because my daughter needed stability. I don't take a salary from the foundation. I still fix water heaters and furnaces to pay my bills because I won't take money for doing what's right. So whatever story you're telling yourself to justify your jealousy and your greed, it's just that, a story." Derek's face had gone red. "You think you're noble? You're just too stupid to capitalize on an opportunity when it's handed to you." "Maybe, or maybe I understand something you never will, that some things matter more than money, like integrity, like actually caring about the people in your life instead of seeing them as assets to exploit." "That's enough," Sloane said, but her voice lacked heat. She was staring at Caleb with an expression he couldn't quite read. Derek laughed, harsh and ugly. "You two deserve each other, the bleeding heart billionaire and the self-righteous handyman. I give it 6 months before this whole charade implodes and you both realize you're from different worlds that were never meant to intersect." He left, slamming the door behind him with enough force to rattle the walls. In the silence that followed, Sloane sank into her desk chair, looking suddenly fragile. "He's not wrong," she said quietly, "about us being from different worlds." Caleb felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Is that what you think?" "I think that I've destroyed my career, alienated my family, and attached myself to a man who probably wishes I'd never crashed my car on that rainy night." She wouldn't meet his eyes. "I think that Derek's right. This was always going to implode eventually." "Do you want it to?" "Want what?" "To implode. To end this before it gets more complicated." Caleb crouched down so he could see her face. "Because if you do, tell me now. Tell me the foundation was a mistake, that bringing me into your life was a mistake, and I'll walk away. I'll take Lily and go back to my simple existence, and you can rebuild your empire without the weight of a poor handyman dragging you down." Sloane finally looked at him, and there were tears streaming down her face. "I don't want you to go." "Then I'm staying." "Caleb, you don't understand what you're signing up for. The media scrutiny, the gossip, the constant speculation about our relationship and our motives. They're going to tear us apart looking for scandal. Let them look. They won't find anything because there's nothing to find except two people trying to help others and maybe, possibly, starting to care about each other in the process." He reached up, gently wiping away her tears with his thumb. "I'm not afraid of your world, Sloane. I'm just afraid of losing this, whatever this is, before we figure out what it could be. What if I lose everything? What if the money runs out? What if the foundation fails? What if I end up with nothing? Then you'll have what I've had for years, nothing except what matters, and you'll survive it because you're stronger than you think." Caleb smiled slightly. "Besides, I'm pretty good at living on nothing. I could teach you." Sloane laughed through her tears, watery and broken and beautiful. "You're the only person who's ever made poverty sound appealing. That's because it's not about the poverty. It's about knowing who you are when everything else is stripped away." He stood, offered her his hand. "Come on, let's get out of this place." "And go where?" "My house. Lily's been asking when she gets to have tea with Miss Sloane again." They left Ashford Industries together, Sloane carrying her single box of personal items, while security guards watched with carefully neutral expressions. The black sedan was gone. That had been a company car. Instead, they piled into Caleb's beat-up truck, the cardboard box sitting between them on the bench seat. As they pulled away from the glass tower that had been Sloane's kingdom, she looked back once, then resolutely faced forward. "No regrets?" Caleb asked. "Only that I didn't do this sooner."
Lily was thrilled to have Sloane at dinner, chattering endlessly about her day at school, her drawing that made it onto the classroom wall, the frog she'd found at recess that Mrs. Chen said she absolutely could not keep as a pet. Sloane listened to all of it with genuine interest, asking questions and laughing at Lily's dramatic retellings, and watching them together, his daughter and this woman who'd crashed into his life like a meteor. Caleb felt something settle in his chest, something that felt suspiciously like rightness. After Lily went to bed, Caleb and Sloane sat at his kitchen table with cheap wine and chipped mugs, talking about everything and nothing. The Foundation's next steps, the families they'd helped, the ones they couldn't help fast enough. "I got a call today," Sloane said eventually, "from a reporter at the Portland Tribune. They want to do a story on us, on the Foundation, on how we met, on our unconventional partnership." She made air quotes around the last words. "You told them no." "I told them I'd think about it." She swirled the wine in her mug. "Part of me wants to tell our story, set the record straight before the gossip blogs write their own version. But another part knows that the moment we go public with any kind of personal narrative, we become the story instead of the work. And I don't want that. So we stay quiet, keep our heads down, let the work speak for itself." "Is that enough for you, watching from the shadows while I take all the credit?" Caleb shrugged. "I've been in shadows my whole life. It's comfortable there. Besides, this was never about credit for me. It was about making sure Lily grew up in a world where people help each other, where kindness isn't transactional." Sloane studied him for a long moment, her gray eyes unreadable in the dim kitchen light. "When did you get so wise?" "Somewhere between replacing my 10th furnace and pulling a stubborn CEO from a burning car." She laughed, and the sound was lighter than he'd heard in weeks. They talked until midnight, until Sloane's eyes started drooping and she had to stifle yawns behind her hand. "You should go," Caleb said reluctantly. "It's late." "I don't have anywhere to go. I've been staying at a hotel since I moved out of my penthouse." She said it casually, but Caleb heard the loneliness underneath. "You could stay here. On the couch, I mean. Like I did for you." "That seems fair." So Sloane Ashford, former CEO of a billion-dollar company, spent the night on Caleb Mercer's lumpy couch, under a blanket that had seen better days, and somehow it felt more like home than anywhere she'd lived in the past decade. In the morning, Lily found her there and declared it the best surprise ever. They made pancakes together. Well, Caleb made them, while Lily and Sloane set the table and argued about whether chocolate chips or blueberries were superior. It felt domestic, normal. Like maybe Derek was wrong and different worlds could intersect after all, could create something new and strange and beautiful in the overlap. Later, after Lily left for school and Sloane had borrowed one of Caleb's t-shirts because she'd slept in her business clothes, they sat on the porch watching the neighborhood wake up. "I'm going to buy a house," Sloane said suddenly. "Nothing fancy, just a normal house in a normal neighborhood where I can be a normal person for a while." "You're a billionaire. You're never going to be normal." "Former CEO," she corrected. "Currently unemployed foundation director who sleeps on friends' couches." "Is that what we are? Friends?" Sloane turned to look at him, and there was something raw and vulnerable in her expression. "I don't know what we are, Caleb, but I know that when I'm with you, I feel more like myself than I have in years, and that terrifies me almost as much as it makes me hopeful." Caleb knew he should say something profound, something that would ease the fear he saw in her eyes, but all he could manage was the truth. "Yeah, me too." They sat in silence as Portland woke up around them. Two people from impossible different worlds trying to figure out if the space between them could be bridged or if it would always be a chasm too wide to cross. Time would tell. But for now, sitting on his porch with coffee going cold in their hands and the promise of work that mattered ahead of them, it was enough. The gossip hit the internet 3 days later like a sledgehammer wrapped in silk. Caleb was replacing a cracked pipe under Mrs. Chen's sink when his phone started buzzing incessantly. Then it rang, then it buzzed again. By the time he crawled out from under the cabinet, he had 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. The first one he opened was from Marcus, checkportlandpulse.com. Now. The website loaded slowly on his phone, but when it did, Caleb's stomach dropped straight through the floor. The headline screamed in bold letters, "From burning car to bedroom, the billionaire and her blue-collar boy toy."
Below it was a photo, grainy but unmistakable, of Sloane leaving his house early in the morning wearing his oversized t-shirt, her hair disheveled, her business clothes from the previous day folded over her arm. The caption read, "Sloane Ashford does the walk of shame from mysterious boyfriend's modest home." The article was worse. It painted a picture of a desperate woman clinging to a younger man after losing her company, suggested Caleb was a opportunistic gold digger who'd orchestrated the whole thing, implied the foundation was just an elaborate cover for their affair. There were quotes from anonymous sources close to the family, saying Sloane had become erratic and unstable, that Caleb had isolated her from friends and relatives, that the whole situation was a cautionary tale about what happens when brilliant women let their emotions override their judgment. Caleb read it twice, his hands shaking with rage. His phone rang again. This time it was Sloane. "I'm so sorry," she said immediately, her voice tight. "I should have been more careful, should have thought about cameras. Where are you?" "My hotel. Caleb, they're calling me every name in the book. Desperate, pathetic, having a mental breakdown. And you. They're saying you're using me, that you've been planning this from the beginning."
Her voice cracked. They found Jennifer Oakes, interviewed her, twisted her words to make it sound like the foundation is a scam. Caleb closed his eyes. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know. My lawyer says we could sue for libel, but that would just make it a bigger story. Marcus thinks we should issue a statement, but anything we say will be picked apart and used against us." "So we say nothing." "Can we afford to say nothing? Caleb, this is going to affect the foundation. Families who need help might not call because they think we're frauds. Donors might pull out. Everything we've built could collapse because I was too stupid to think about photographers lurking around your neighborhood." In the background, Caleb could hear voices. Probably Marcus and other members of Sloane's team. He heard someone mention crisis management, another voice talking about damage control. The machinery of wealth and power grinding into motion to protect one of their own. "Come over," Caleb said quietly. "What?" "Come to my house. Bring Marcus if you want. Bring your whole team. But come here. We'll figure this out together." "Caleb, there are probably still photographers. Let them take pictures. Let them write whatever they want. I'm done hiding from people who've already decided what our story is." He took a breath. "We know the truth. The families we've helped know the truth. That's what matters." Silence on the other end. Then, softly, "Okay. I'll be there in an hour." Caleb spent that hour calling the families they'd helped through the Mercer Fund. Jennifer Oakes first, who was crying before he even spoke. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "The reporter twisted everything I said. I told them you changed my life, that the foundation was a miracle, and they made it sound like I was part of some scheme. I never meant—" "It's okay, Jennifer. I know you didn't. These people, they don't care about the truth. They care about clicks and controversy." "What can I do?" "I'll call them back. I'll demand a retraction." "No. Don't engage with them at all. Just keep living your life. Keep finishing that nursing degree. That's the best revenge, proving that what we did mattered." He called 8 more families after that, heard the same story every time. The reporter had contacted them, asked leading questions, then cherry-picked quotes to fit the narrative of scandal and deception. But underneath the fear and anger, Caleb heard something else. Fierce loyalty. These families knew what the Mercer Fund had done for them, and they weren't about to let some gossip blog destroy it. When Sloane arrived, she brought Marcus and 2 other people Caleb didn't recognize. A severe woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Patricia the lawyer, and a younger man named David who apparently handled PR. They set up in Caleb's living room like a war council, laptops and tablets spread across every surface. Lily came home from school in the middle of it, took one look at the organized chaos, and went straight to Caleb. "Daddy, why are all these people here? Did something bad happen?" Caleb knelt down to her level. "Some people wrote mean things about me and Miss Sloane. We're figuring out how to handle it." Lily's face scrunched up in thought. "Like when Tommy called me stupid because I got a B on my math test." "Kind of like that, yeah. Mrs. Chen said when people are mean, it's because they're hurting inside and they want other people to hurt too." Lily looked at Sloane, who was listening from across the room. "Is that true for grown-ups too?" Sloane's expression softened. "Yes, sweetheart. I think it is. Then I'm sorry they're hurting, but they shouldn't be mean to you and Daddy. You're the nicest people I know. Lily gave them both a fierce hug, then went to her room to do homework, leaving the adults staring after her. Patricia cleared her throat.
Out of the mouths of babes. Now, about this statement. No statement, Caleb said. Everyone turned to look at him. Excuse me? Patricia's eyebrows climbed toward her hairline. We're not issuing a statement. We're not responding to the article. We're not playing their game. Caleb looked at Sloane. You said the moment we make this about us, we lose sight of the work. So we don't make it about us. We make it about the families. David, the PR guy, shook his head. With respect, Mr. Mercer, silence will be interpreted as guilt. If you don't control the narrative, then we don't control it, but we also don't feed it. Caleb crossed his arms. Here's what we do. We keep helping families. We keep running the foundation exactly as we have been. We document every success story, every life changed, every person helped. And when reporters come asking about our supposed scandal, we redirect to the work, every single time. That's actually not terrible, Marcus said slowly. If we can flood the media with positive stories about the foundation's impact, it might drown out the gossip. Patricia looked skeptical. Or it might look like desperate deflection. Only if we make it look desperate, Sloane said, and Caleb heard the shift in her voice. The return of the CEO who'd built an empire through force of will. We don't defend ourselves. We don't deny anything. We simply focus laser-like on the mission. Let our actions speak louder than their speculation. It's risky, David warned. Everything worth doing is risky, Sloane replied. She looked at Caleb. I'm in if you are. I've been in since you crashed your car. Over the next week, the gossip blogs had a field day. Photos of Caleb and Sloane emerged from every angle, leaving his house together, having coffee at the cafe, sitting on his porch. The speculation grew wilder. Some articles claimed they were already secretly married. Others suggested Caleb had multiple women he was scamming. One particularly creative piece alleged that Sloane had staged her own car accident to meet him, like some kind of billionaire catfishing scheme. Through it all, the Mercer Fund kept operating. They helped a veteran struggling with medical bills, a teacher who'd been injured and couldn't work, a family of 5 whose house had burned down. Each family gave interviews if they wanted to, sharing their stories of how the foundation had appeared in their darkest hour and offered help without judgment or strings. Slowly, gradually, the narrative began to shift. Local news stations picked up the positive stories, social media filled with testimonials from grateful families. The Portland Tribune, the same paper that had wanted to interview them before, ran a front-page story titled "The Foundation That Asks Nothing: How the Mercer Fund is Changing Lives Without Red Tape." But the personal attacks didn't stop. If anything, they intensified. Caleb started getting recognized everywhere he went. Sometimes people thanked him for his work. More often, they stared and whispered, their eyes full of judgment and speculation. At the grocery store, a woman loudly told her friend that some men will do anything for money, even seduce desperate older women. At the hardware store, the clerk refused to serve him, saying he didn't want to be associated with people like that. It wore on him in ways he hadn't expected. Caleb had spent most of his life invisible, just another struggling dad trying to get by. Now he was constantly watched, constantly judged, every action dissected for hidden motives. Lily felt it too. Kids at school started asking questions, repeating things they'd heard their parents say. One afternoon, Caleb got called to the principal's office because Lily had punched a boy who'd called him a gold digger who was using the sad rich lady. I told him to stop, Lily said stubbornly, her arms crossed and jaw set in that familiar expression Caleb recognized as his own. I told him 3 times, but he kept saying it, and then he called you a bad daddy, and Her eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, I know violence isn't the answer. Principal Davidson looked at Caleb with sympathy. Given the circumstances, we're willing to let this go with a warning. But Mr. Mercer, is there anything we should know? Anything we can do to help? Just make sure kids aren't bullying my daughter because of gossip their parents are spreading, Caleb said tightly. That night, after Lily was asleep, Caleb sat in his kitchen and seriously considered Derek's offer for the first time. Not because he wanted the money, but because he was tired. Tired of being watched. Tired of being judged. Tired of seeing his daughter hurt because of choices he'd made.
His phone buzzed with a text from Sloane. "You okay?" He typed back. "Define okay." She called immediately. "I heard about Lily. Marcus has connections at the school. He told me what happened." "Of course he did." Caleb rubbed his eyes. "This is getting out of hand, Sloane. My daughter is getting in fights because of us." "I know, and I'm so sorry. If I could go back, if I could have been more careful, it wouldn't have mattered. They were always going to find something to attack. We gave them the foundation, they'd have found the house. We hid the house, they'd have found something else." He took a shaky breath. "Maybe Derek was right. Maybe we're from worlds that shouldn't mix." "Don't say that." "Why not? It's true, isn't it? You lost your company because of me. My daughter is being bullied because of you. Everything we touch turns into ammunition for people who want to tear us down." Caleb said, "I'm tired, Sloane. I'm so goddamn tired of fighting." Silence on the other end, then quietly. "Can I come over? It's almost midnight." "I don't care." "Can I come over?" Caleb should have said no. Should have ended this before it destroyed what little stability Lily had left. But instead he said, "Yeah, come over." She arrived 20 minutes later wearing jeans and a sweater, no makeup, her hair in a messy ponytail. She looked younger like this, more vulnerable, more real. They sat on his porch in the cold November air, their breath coming out in clouds. "I'm not good at this," Sloane said eventually, "at caring about people. I spent so many years building walls, convincing myself that isolation was strength. And then you came along and kicked those walls down without even trying." "I didn't mean to." "I know. That's what made it so terrifying. You weren't trying to get anything from me. You just saw someone who needed help, and you helped. No calculations, no angles, just simple human decency." She turned to look at him. "Do you know how rare that is in my world? How foreign. Your world sounds lonely." "It was. Until you." Sloane's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I'm falling for you, Caleb. Have been since you refused my check in this very house. And it scares me more than losing my company, more than the gossip, more than anything because I don't know how to do this. How to be with someone without the safety net of money or power or control." Caleb felt his heart hammering against his ribs. "Sloane, I know you're tired. I know this is hard, but please don't walk away. Not yet. Not when we're so close to proving that this—" She gestured between them. "Whatever this is real." What if it's not enough? What if being real doesn't protect Lily from getting hurt? Then we protect her together. We circle the wagons, we fight back, we do whatever it takes. But we do it together. Sloane reached for his hand and Caleb let her take it. "I've been alone my whole life, Caleb. Even when I was married, even when I was surrounded by people, I was alone. I don't want to be alone anymore." "You were married?" "For 3 years. He wanted the Ashford name and access to my money. When I refused to be his trophy wife, he left, took half my assets and a lawyer who made sure I knew exactly how little I'd meant to him." She laughed bitterly. "I swore after that I'd never let anyone close enough to hurt me again. And then you had to go and save my life and be decent and make me feel things I didn't think I was capable of feeling." Caleb squeezed her hand. "I'm falling for you too. Have been since you walked into my kitchen looking lost and vulnerable despite trying to be tough. But I'm scared too. Not of you, but of what loving you might cost. What if it costs nothing? What if we're the ones setting the price and we keep making it higher than it needs to be?" That's very philosophical for midnight on a Tuesday. "I've had a lot of time to think." Sloane shifted closer until their shoulders were touching. "I know you're trying to protect Lily. I know I'm a complication you didn't ask for, but I'm also someone who cares about both of you more than I've cared about anything in years. That has to count for something." Before Caleb could respond, the porch light next door flicked on, and Mrs. Chen emerged, wrapped in a bathrobe and looking extremely pleased with herself. "Finally," she called over. "I've been waiting for you two to stop dancing around each other for weeks. Caleb, invite the woman inside before she freezes. Sloane, tell this stubborn man you're in love with him so we can all move on with our lives." "Mrs. Chen," Caleb felt his face burning. "Don't Mrs. Chen me. I'm old, not blind. You two have been mooning over each other like teenagers. It's sweet but also exhausting to watch." She waved her hand dismissively. "Now go inside, have your moment, and for God's sake make sure Caleb locks the door this time.
Last thing we need is more paparazzi photos. She disappeared back inside, leaving Caleb and Sloane staring at each other in mortified silence. Then Sloane started laughing, really laughing, the kind that shook her whole body and brought tears to her eyes. Caleb couldn't help but join in, and suddenly they were both laughing like idiots on his porch at midnight, while Mrs. Chen's living room light stayed strategically on like a watchful guardian. "She's something else," Sloane managed between gasps. "She's been my family since Sarah died. Bossy, interfering, absolutely wonderful family." Caleb stood, pulling Sloane up with him. "Come on, let's go inside before she comes back out with more commentary." They settled on the couch, the same couch where this had all started, where Sloane had slept that first night and everything had shifted. Caleb made tea, actual tea this time, not coffee, and they sat close together, not quite touching but aware of every breath between them. "I need to tell you something," Caleb said eventually. "About Sarah, about why this is so hard for me." Sloane set down her mug, giving him her full attention. "When Sarah got sick, I promised her I'd take care of Lily, that I'd give our daughter the best life I could, that I'd protect her from everything. And I failed, over and over. Couldn't afford the best doctors, couldn't keep Sarah alive, could barely keep us housed and fed after she was gone." The words caught in his throat. "The night before she died, Sarah made me promise something else. She said, 'Don't close your heart, Caleb. Don't let grief make you hard. Lily needs to see you love again, needs to know that love is worth the risk.'" "You've kept that promise," Sloane said softly. "You're one of the most open-hearted people I've ever met." "Maybe, but I've also been terrified of letting anyone close, of risking Lily's stability for my own happiness. And then you came along and I had to choose. Keep my promise to Sarah or keep Lily safe from the chaos loving you might bring. And now I'm realizing maybe those things aren't mutually exclusive. Maybe loving you is part of keeping that promise. Maybe showing Lily that it's okay to care about people even when it's complicated is the lesson she needs most." Sloane's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I don't deserve you. That's the thing about love. It's not about deserving. It's about choosing each other despite all the reasons not to." Is that what this is? Love? Caleb thought about the past months, the foundation, the late-night strategy sessions, the way his heart jumped every time his phone buzzed with her name, the way Lily lit up when Sloane visited, the way Sloane looked at him like he was someone worth seeing, not just a project or a charity case. "Yeah," he said, "I think it is." Sloane set her mug on the coffee table with careful precision, then turned to face him fully. "Then I need to tell you something too. I bought a house. You mentioned that. It's 3 blocks from here. Small, normal, exactly what I said I wanted. I closed on it yesterday." She took a shaky breath. "I bought it because I wanted to be near you and Lily. Because I'm tired of hotel rooms and penthouses that feel like museums. Because I want to be part of a neighborhood, part of a community, part of your lives." Caleb felt something shift in his chest, like a lock tumbling open. "That's a big commitment." "I know. And if it's too much, if I'm moving too fast or pushing too hard, tell me and I'll slow down. But Caleb, I'm all in. On the foundation, on this," she gestured between them, "on building something real. I just need to know if you're in too." He should have been cautious, should have thought about the implications, the continued scrutiny, the risks to Lily. But sitting there with Sloane looking at him with those sharp, vulnerable eyes, Caleb found he didn't want to be cautious anymore. "I'm in," he said, completely, terrifyingly in. She kissed him then, or maybe he kissed her. It was hard to say who moved first. All Caleb knew was that one moment they were talking and the next her lips were on his, soft and certain and tasting like tea and promises. Her hands cupped his face, his arms wrapped around her waist, and for a moment the whole chaotic world fell away. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sloane rested her forehead against his. "We're going to get so much more gossip for this," she murmured. "Let them talk. Your neighbors are definitely watching. Mrs. Chen is definitely watching, probably taking notes." Sloane laughed, the sound vibrating through both of them where they were pressed together. "So what now?" "Now we take it one day at a time. We keep running the foundation. We deal with the gossip as it comes. We protect Lily, and we figure out how to be together despite every reason we shouldn't work. That's a terrible plan. Completely unstructured, no clear metrics for success, way too many variables. Welcome to my world. Your world is terrifying. Yeah, but you're in it now. No backing out. Sloane pulled back just enough to look him in the eyes, her expression serious. I wouldn't dream of it. They talked until the early hours of morning, until Caleb's eyes were drooping, and Sloane had to stifle yawns. This time when she stayed over, she slept in the guest room like a proper overnight guest, and in the morning, Lily found her making breakfast and declared that Miss Sloane should definitely stay over more often because she made much better pancakes than Daddy. Thanks, kiddo, Caleb said dryly, really feeling the love. Your pancakes are good too, Lily assured him, just not as fluffy. Sloane caught his eye over Lily's head and smiled, and Caleb felt something settle in his chest. This was right, messy and complicated and probably ill-advised, but right. The gossip continued. The blogs found new angles, new photos, new ways to twist their story into something scandalous. But the Mercer Fund kept growing, kept helping families, kept proving through action what words couldn't convey. And slowly, grudgingly, public opinion began to turn. It started with an op-ed in the Portland Tribune written by a single mother they'd helped, defending the foundation and calling out the media for focusing on speculation instead of impact. Then a local news segment featuring 5 families sharing how the Mercer Fund had changed their lives. Then a viral social media post from a teenager whose college dreams had been saved by the foundation's education assistance program. The tide was turning, but Caleb knew better than to think the fight was over, because Derek Ashford hadn't made his move yet, and when he did, it would be designed to destroy everything they'd built. Derek's attack came on a Thursday morning, precisely calculated for maximum damage. Caleb was driving Lily to school when Marcus called, his voice tight with controlled panic. Turn on the radio. Any news station. Caleb's stomach dropped as he switched on the local news, and the anchor's voice filled the truck with practiced concern. Breaking news this morning as allegations surface regarding the Mercer Fund, the charitable organization founded by former Ashford Industries CEO Sloane Ashford. Documents obtained by this station suggest financial irregularities, including substantial payments to consultant Caleb Mercer that weren't disclosed in the foundation's public filings. Critics are calling it a tax shelter scheme designed to funnel money to Ashford's romantic partner while claiming charitable status. Caleb switched it off, his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. Daddy? Lily's voice was small. What does that mean? It means someone's lying about me and Miss Sloane, baby, but we're going to fix it. After dropping Lily at school, ignoring the stares from other parents, the whispered conversations that stopped when he approached, Caleb drove straight to Sloane's new house. She met him at the door, already dressed for battle in a sharp black suit, her face pale but determined. It's Derek, she said without preamble. He fabricated documents showing you've been paid hundreds of thousands of dollars through shell companies. Made it look like embezzlement disguised as charity. But I haven't taken any money except the house. I know that. You know that. But the documents look real enough to trigger an investigation. The IRS is already asking questions. So is the state attorney general. She pulled him inside where Marcus and Patricia were set up at her dining room table with laptops and stacks of paper. We're gathering evidence to prove the documents are forgeries, but that takes time. Meanwhile, every news outlet in the Pacific Northwest is running with this story. Caleb felt the room spin slightly. This destroys everything. The foundation, your reputation, any chance of helping more families. Only if we let it, Sloane's voice was steel. Derek wants us to panic, to make mistakes, to turn on each other. We're not going to give him that satisfaction. Patricia looked up from her laptop, her severe expression somehow even more severe. Mr. Mercer, I need to ask you directly. Have you received any payments, gifts, or financial considerations from Ms. Ashford beyond the property transfer? Any cash, any assets, anything at all? No, nothing. Have you ever used foundation funds for personal expenses? Even something small, even accidentally? No, I don't even have access to the foundation accounts. Good. That makes this easier to disprove, but I won't lie to you. The court of public opinion doesn't care about proof. They care about narrative. And right now, the narrative is that you're a con artist, and Ms. Ashford is either complicit or a victim? Caleb's phone started ringing. He glanced at the screen and saw it was Lily's school. Mr. Mercer, this is Principal Davidson. I'm afraid there's been an incident. Several parents have called demanding that Lily be separated from their children, citing concerns about your situation. And someone spray painted some rather vulgar accusations on your truck in our parking lot. The rage that swept through Caleb was white hot and absolute. I'm on my way. Sloane grabbed her keys. I'm coming with you. That'll make it worse. I don't care. No one threatens Lily. No one. They arrived at Riverside Elementary to find Caleb's truck covered in red paint. Thief, liar, gold digger. Principal Davidson was waiting with Lily in the office, the little girl's face tear-stained but defiant. Daddy! She ran to him, and Caleb scooped her up, holding her tight while his heart shattered. I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault, Lily said fiercely. Tommy's mom did it. I saw her. She had the paint can and everything. Principal Davidson cleared her throat. We've contacted the police about the vandalism. As for the parents' demands, I've told them that we don't discriminate based on unfounded allegations. Lily is welcome here as long as she wants to be. Thank you, Caleb said roughly. But as they walked out to the parking lot, Sloane's hand on his back, Lily clutched against his chest, Caleb saw the crowd that had gathered. Parents with their phones out, filming. A few reporters who'd somehow gotten wind of the situation. And standing at the edge of it all, watching with cold satisfaction, was Derek Ashford. Something in Caleb snapped. He handed Lily to Sloane, whispered, "Take her to the car," and walked straight toward Derek. Caleb, don't! Sloane started, but he was already moving. Derek's smile was triumphant as Caleb approached. Quite a mess you've made, Mercer. All those families counting on the foundation, and now it's going to collapse because you couldn't keep your hands out of the cookie jar. You fabricated those documents. Prove it. I will. And when I do, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are. Derek laughed. You think anyone will care? By the time you prove anything, the foundation will be defunct. My sister will be a laughingstock, and you'll be a cautionary tale about what happens when poor people try to play in the big leagues. He leaned closer. I warned you to take the money and walk away. This is what happens when you don't listen. Caleb felt his fist clench, felt the overwhelming urge to wipe that smug expression off Derek's face. But then he heard Lily's voice calling, "Daddy?" and remembered what was actually at stake here. You can destroy my reputation, Caleb said quietly. You can shut down the foundation, ruin Sloane's name, turn the whole city against us. But you can't destroy what we've already done. Those families we helped, they're still helped. Their lives are still changed, and no amount of lies can erase that. How noble. I'm sure it'll comfort you when you're in prison for fraud. Caleb walked away before he did something stupid, before the rage overwhelmed the control. He found Sloane and Lily waiting by her car, both of them watching him with identical worried expressions. Let's go home, he said. That night, after Lily finally fell asleep, her small hand clutching his shirt like she was afraid he'd disappear, Caleb, Sloane, Marcus, and Patricia held a war council in his living room. The forgeries are good, Patricia admitted. Whoever Derek hired knew what they were doing, but there are inconsistencies. Digital signatures that don't match, dates that don't align, routing numbers that lead nowhere. Give me 3 days and I can prove they're fake. 3 days might be too long, Marcus said grimly. The foundation has already lost half its volunteer staff. Donors are pulling out. The hotline has gone from 50 calls a day to 5. People are scared to be associated with us. Sloane sat very still, her face a mask of control, but Caleb could see the devastation in her eyes. So we've lost. No. Caleb stood up, started pacing. We haven't lost. We've just been playing defense when we should be on offense. What are you thinking? Marcus asked. Derek wants a scandal? Let's give him one, but not the one he's expecting. Caleb turned to Patricia. Can you have your proof ready by tomorrow afternoon? Possibly, if I work through the night. Do it. Marcus, I need you to contact every family we've helped. Tell them what's happening. Ask if any of them would be willing to speak publicly about their experiences with the foundation. Caleb, we can't ask them to put themselves in the crosshairs, Sloane protested. We're not asking, we're offering them a choice. Some will say no, and that's fine.
But some might say yes, and their voices matter more than any document. He looked at Sloan. And you need to call a press conference. To say what? The truth. All of it. How we met, why you started the foundation, what it actually does. No spin, no careful PR messaging, just honesty. Patricia shook her head. That's incredibly risky. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Then let them use it. At least it'll be the truth instead of Derek's lies. Sloan studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled. Not the polished public smile, but something real and fierce and hopeful. Okay, let's do it. The press conference was set for Friday afternoon at a community center in the neighborhood where Jennifer Oakes lived. Not some sterile hotel conference room, but a place that actually meant something. Caleb spent the morning sick with nerves, second-guessing everything. What if this backfired? What if they made things worse? What if he just guaranteed that Lily would never have a normal life? Mrs. Chen found him on his porch, staring at nothing. You're spiraling, she observed, settling into the chair next to him. That obvious? You have that look your father used to get, like the weight of the world is on your shoulders and you're not sure you can carry it. She patted his hand. Want to know what he used to tell me when I'd find him like this? What? He'd say, Mrs. Chen, I can't control what other people think or say or do. I can only control whether I do the right thing. And if I do the right thing and it still goes wrong, at least I can sleep at night. She squeezed his hand. You're doing the right thing, Caleb. Your father would be proud. At 2:00, Caleb stood in the community center with Sloan, looking out at the packed room. Reporters filled the front rows, cameras ready. Behind them sat 17 families they'd helped through the Mercer Fund, including Jennifer Oakes with her 2 kids. And in the very back, trying to be inconspicuous, sat Derek and Victoria Ashford. Sloan stepped up to the microphone first, and Caleb saw her hands shake slightly before she steadied them. Thank you for coming. I'm going to tell you a story, and unlike most stories you've heard this week, this one is true. She took a breath. 3 months ago, I crashed my car on a rainy night outside Portland. I should have died. I would have died if not for a man who had no reason to help me, who gained nothing from pulling me from a burning vehicle except the knowledge that he'd saved a life. That man is Caleb Mercer, and he refused to let me pay him for his trouble. The room was silent, everyone leaning forward. I was furious, Sloan continued. I couldn't understand why someone would refuse money when they clearly needed it, so I investigated. I learned about his life, his struggles, his daughter. And I learned something else. I'd forgotten what it meant to be human. Forgotten what it was like to need help, to accept help, to give help without expecting anything in return. Caleb reminded me. So I started the Mercer Fund not as a tax shelter or a scam, but as a way to pass on what he gave me, dignity in the face of struggle. She pulled out a folder, held it up. These are the documents my brother fabricated to make it look like I've been paying Caleb through shell companies. They're very convincing. They're also completely false, as my attorney will prove. But let's say for a moment they were real. Let's say I have been paying Caleb. Do you know what for? For working 80-hour weeks helping families. For taking calls at 3 a.m. from desperate parents. For visiting every single person we've helped to make sure they're treated with respect. For teaching me how to see people instead of statistics. Sloan's voice broke slightly, then strengthened. If I were paying him, it wouldn't be nearly enough. But I'm not paying him because Caleb Mercer doesn't do this for money. He does it because he remembers what it's like to be desperate, to be one crisis away from losing everything. And he can't stand the thought of anyone else feeling that helpless. She stepped back and Caleb moved to the microphone, his heart pounding. I'm not good at public speaking, he started, and heard a few sympathetic chuckles. I'm better at fixing water heaters than explaining myself, but I'm going to try. He looked directly at the cameras. Everything Sloan just said is true. I pulled her from a car. She tried to pay me. I refused because taking money would have made it transactional, would have turned mercy into business, and I can't live that way. He paused, gathering his thoughts. My wife died 3 years ago. Before she passed, she made me promise something. She said, don't close your heart, Caleb. Don't let grief make you hard. And I've tried to keep that promise while raising our daughter alone, while struggling to make ends meet, while watching other families go through the same desperate situations we faced.
When Sloan offered me a chance to actually help those families, I said yes. Not for money. I still fix furnaces to pay my bills. But because helping people is what my wife would have wanted. It's what my daughter needs to see. It's what makes life worth living. Caleb looked at the families sitting in the audience, saw Jennifer Oakes wiping tears from her eyes. The Mercer Fund has helped 73 families in 3 months. 73 families who are about to lose their homes, their jobs, their hope. We've prevented 11 evictions, kept 9 kids in school, helped 6 people finish degrees that will change their lives. And we did it without making them feel like charity cases, without judging them, without demanding they prove they deserved help. Because everyone deserves help when they're struggling. Everyone. He took a breath. So yes, I'm in a relationship with Sloan Ashford. Yes, she gave me a house because she thought my daughter deserved stability. Yes, we care about each other. But that doesn't change the work we've done or the lives we've helped. And if you want to attack us for that, go ahead. Just know that every minute you spend on us is a minute you're not spending on the real story, that people are suffering, and most of society doesn't care until it makes good gossip. Caleb stepped back, and Jennifer Oakes stood up. Can I say something? She called out. The reporters turned, cameras swiveling to focus on her. Jennifer walked to the front, her kids following close behind. My name is Jennifer Oakes. 3 months ago, I was going to lose my apartment. I was going to drop out of nursing school. I was going to fail my kids because I couldn't do it all alone. Her voice shook but didn't break. Then I called the Mercer Fund, not because I thought they'd help. I'd been turned down by every other charity in the city, but because I had nowhere else to go. And you know what happened? Caleb showed up at my door within an hour. Didn't ask me to fill out forms. Didn't lecture me about budgeting or making better choices. Just asked what I needed and made it happen. She turned to look directly at Derek in the back row. So when you call this a scam, when you say Caleb and Sloan are con artists, you're calling me a liar. You're calling the 72 other families they helped liars. And I won't stand for that. One by one, other families stood up. A veteran who'd been struggling with medical bills. A teacher who'd been injured and couldn't work. A single father whose factory had closed. Each of them shared their story. Each of them defended the foundation. Each of them made it clear that what the Mercer Fund had done was real and meaningful and life-changing. By the time they finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even some of the reporters looked moved. Then Patricia stood up, holding a thumb drive. I have here irrefutable evidence that the documents accusing the Mercer Fund of financial irregularities are forgeries. Digital forensics show they were created last Tuesday on a computer registered to Derek Ashford. I'm turning this over to the State Attorney General for investigation. The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, and in the back, Derek stood up and walked out, his face a mask of cold fury. Victoria Ashford stayed seated, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she stood and walked to the front of the room. The crowd quieted, everyone wondering what she'd say. She stopped in front of Sloan, and for a long moment, mother and daughter just looked at each other. You gave up everything for this, Victoria said quietly. Yes. Your company, your reputation, any chance at a normal life with someone from your own social circle. I didn't give it up. I exchanged it for something better. Victoria's lips thinned. I raised you to be strong, to be successful, to never let anyone, especially a man, derail your ambitions. You raised me to be cold, Sloan replied, her voice steady. To measure my worth in dollars and market share, to see people as assets or liabilities. And I was miserable. Successful, yes. Powerful, yes. But completely, utterly miserable. She glanced at Caleb, then back at her mother. Caleb didn't derail my ambitions. He helped me find better ones. Victoria studied her daughter for what felt like an eternity. Then she turned to Caleb. You understand that my children are my legacy? That everything I built, everything I fought for, was meant to secure their futures? I understand that love looks different to different people, Caleb said carefully. But I also understand that your daughter is brilliant and capable and doesn't need securing. She needs to be seen, really seen, not as an extension of your legacy, but as her own person. And you see her? Every day. Victoria looked between them, her face softening almost imperceptibly.
I don't approve of this. I don't understand it, but I can see that my daughter is happier than she's been in years, and perhaps that matters more than I thought. She turned to leave, then paused. Don't make me regret not fighting harder to stop this. It wasn't approval exactly, but it wasn't opposition either. For Victoria Ashford, it was practically a blessing.
After the press conference, after the reporters had gotten their quotes, and the families had shared hugs and promises to stay in touch, Caleb and Sloan found themselves alone in the community center. That was insane, Sloan said, leaning against the wall. That was necessary. We're going to get so much more attention now, more scrutiny, more judgment. Let them look. They won't find anything except two people trying to do good in the world. Caleb moved closer. Besides, I'm tired of hiding, tired of being ashamed of caring about you because it doesn't fit someone else's narrative. Sloan's eyes widened. Caleb, I love you, he said simply. I'm in love with you. Have been for weeks, maybe months, and I'm done pretending that's something to hide or be embarrassed about. We've known each other for 3 months. I pulled you out of a burning car. You gave me a house. We started a foundation together. We fell in love while the whole city watched and judged. I think we're past conventional timelines. Sloan laughed, tears streaming down her face. You're right. We're so far past conventional, it's not even visible in the rearview mirror. She cupped his face in her hands. I love you too. So much it terrifies me. So much I gave up a company worth billions without a second thought. So much I'm willing to face whatever comes next as long as you're beside me. He kissed her then, right there in the empty community center, and it felt like coming home. The fallout from the press conference was immediate and intense. The fabricated documents were traced back to Derek, who resigned from Ashford Industries rather than face prosecution. Victoria publicly distanced herself from her son's actions while quietly ensuring he didn't face jail time. Family loyalty had its limits, but those limits stopped short of letting blood go to prison. The foundation's reputation recovered quickly, bolstered by the testimony of the families they'd helped and the proof of Derek's deception. Donations actually increased, with people moved by the raw honesty of the press conference. The waiting list grew longer. But Caleb knew the real test would come from the people who mattered most, the community that had watched his life become a spectacle. He got his answer the following Monday when he picked Lily up from school. Principal Davidson met him at the entrance with an apology. I'm sorry about how some of our parents behaved. Several have reached out to express regret, including Tommy's mother. She's paying for the truck damage and wants to apologize to you personally. That's not necessary. It is. What she did was wrong, and she knows it. The principal handed him a folder. Also, we'd like to invite you to speak at our career day next month. The kids should know that there are people like you in the world. People who help others not for recognition, but because it's right. On his way out, 3 different parents stopped to shake his hand and thank him for what the foundation was doing. Mrs. Chen appeared at dinner time with enough food for an army and a knowing smile. Told you it would work out, she said smugly. 2 weeks later, Sloan showed up at Caleb's door looking nervous, which was unusual enough to make him worried. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. She took a breath. I have something to show you. Can you and Lily come with me? They drove to her new house 3 blocks away, a cozy craftsman-style home that looked like it actually belonged in the neighborhood. She led them inside, through rooms filled with furniture that looked comfortable instead of expensive, to a backyard that had a swing set and a garden bed ready for planting. I've been working on this for weeks, Sloan said, her voice shaking slightly. With Marcus's help and Mrs. Chen's input, and about 17 YouTube videos on normal family homes. She turned to them. I want this to be a place where Lily can come over whenever she wants, where you can escape when your house feels too small, where we can figure out what this, she gestured between herself and Caleb, looks like in practice instead of theory. Lily's eyes were huge. Can I really use the swing set? It's yours. Well, ours. If you want it to be. Lily looked at Caleb, silently asking permission. He nodded, and she ran outside with a squeal of delight. Alone in the kitchen, Sloan turned to Caleb with vulnerable eyes. Is this too much? Am I moving too fast? I just keep thinking about what you said, about not hiding, about building something real. He kissed her to stop the spiral of words. It's perfect. You're perfect. This whole chaotic, unconventional situation is perfect.
Really? Really? Though I have one condition. Her eyebrows rose. Which is? Marry me. Sloane froze. What? Caleb hadn't planned this. The words had just emerged, truth that couldn't be contained anymore. Marry me. Not because we have to, not to silence critics or prove anything to anyone, but because I love you and I want to build a life with you. Because Lily adores you and you adore her. Because every day with you feels like I'm keeping the promise I made to Sarah. To live fully, to love openly, to not let fear make me small. Caleb, we've only been together for, I know, it's insane. We barely know each other in the conventional sense, but I know the things that matter, how you treat people, how you fight for what's right, how you look at my daughter like she's precious. I know that you make me want to be better while accepting me as I am. And I know that I don't want to spend another day wondering what we could be when I already know what we are. Sloane's eyes filled with tears. I don't have a ring. Neither do I. We can figure that out later. People will say we're moving too fast, that this is a disaster waiting to happen. Let them say it. We'll prove them wrong by still being together in 5 years, 10 years, 50 years. She laughed through her tears. You're absolutely ridiculous, you know that? Is that a yes? It's a yes on one condition. Name it. We do this right. No press, no spectacle, no turning our relationship into content for people to consume. Just us, Lily, Mrs. Chen, Marcus, and whoever else actually matters. Small and real and ours. Deal. They kissed in Sloane's kitchen, their kitchen soon, while Lily played in the backyard and the future spread out before them, uncertain but full of possibility. The wedding happened 6 months later in Mrs. Chen's backyard because she'd insisted and nobody could say no to her when she used her "don't argue with me" voice.
It was small like they'd promised, just Lily as flower girl, Marcus as best man, a local judge who'd been helped by the foundation, and 30 people who actually mattered. Victoria came, though she spent most of the ceremony looking like she was attending a funeral. But when it was time for toasts, she stood and said simply, "My daughter chose happiness over legacy. I'm still not sure I understand it, but I'm trying to respect it." For Victoria Ashford, it was practically a declaration of love. Derek didn't come, but he sent a note that said, "I was wrong about you, about both of you. Forgiveness isn't something I expect, but perhaps someday, understanding." It was something, at least. A crack in the wall. Lily gave a speech that made everyone cry, talking about how her mommy had told her daddy not to close his heart. And now he was opening it for Miss Sloane. And wasn't that the most beautiful thing ever? Caleb had to excuse himself for a moment, overwhelmed by the rightness of it all. When he came back, Sloane was waiting with Mrs. Chen, both of them smiling. "Your daughter is wise beyond her years," Mrs. Chen observed. "She gets it from her mother," Caleb replied. "And her father," Sloane added, taking his hand. The years that followed weren't perfect. The Mercer Fund faced challenges, funding shortfalls, criticism from people who thought they were doing it wrong, the endless complexity of trying to help people with dignity instead of dependency. Caleb and Sloane argued about strategy, about priorities, about the right way to balance their personal lives with their mission, but they navigated it together. Caleb expanded his repair business, hiring other struggling parents and teaching them skills that would lead to better opportunities. Sloane devoted herself fully to the foundation, using her business acumen to scale their impact while keeping Caleb's principles of dignity and respect at the core. Lily thrived, growing into a teenager who understood both struggle and privilege, who volunteered with the foundation and treated everyone she met with the same kindness her parents had shown each other. 5 years after the wedding, on the anniversary of the night Caleb had pulled Sloane from her burning car, they stood together at a gala for the Mercer Fund. It had grown beyond anything they'd imagined, helping thousands of families, inspiring similar organizations in other cities, proving that charity could be done differently. A reporter approached, asked the question she'd probably asked 100 times before. "Do you ever regret how unconventional your relationship is? How it started?" Sloane looked at Caleb, and he saw everything reflected in her eyes, the struggle, the scandal, the choice to love despite the cost. "Not for a single second," she said. "Never," Caleb agreed. "Because some love stories didn't follow the rules. Some love stories started with fire and mercy and a stubborn refusal to let money define worth. Some love stories survived scrutiny and scandal and family opposition to become something stronger than either person had been alone. And some love stories, the best ones, proved that kindness wasn't purchased, it was lived. Day after day, choice after choice, building a life where dignity mattered more than dollars, and love was measured not in grand gestures but in showing up, again and again, for the people who needed you most. Caleb and Sloane had built that kind of love, had built it from nothing but a rainstorm, a burning car, and the decision to see each other as human beings instead of transactions. And in the end, that was worth more than all the wealth in the world. Late that night, after the gala ended and they'd returned to the house they now shared, the one Sloane had bought 3 blocks from Caleb's original home, which they rented to families transitioning out of homelessness. They sat on their porch just like they had that first morning. "Do you think we've kept our promises?" Sloane asked quietly. "To Sarah? To ourselves? To everyone who believed in us?" Caleb thought about it. About Lily sleeping safely upstairs. About the families whose lives had changed because 2 broken people had chosen to build something together. About Victoria, who'd slowly softened and now volunteered at the foundation once a month. About Jennifer Oakes, who'd finished her nursing degree and now worked at the hospital where Mrs. Chen had spent her career, the circle completing itself. "Yeah," he said finally, "I think we have." Sloane leaned against him, and they sat in comfortable silence as Portland settled into sleep around them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, families to help, critics to face, the endless work of trying to make the world a little bit kinder. But tonight, they had this: each other, their home, the quiet certainty that they'd made the right choice. That mercy had been worth more than money. That love had been worth the risk. That sometimes the most extraordinary things came from the simplest act of helping someone who needed it, expecting nothing in return. And in a city that often forgot to see people instead of problems, Caleb and Sloane had built something that would outlast them both. Not an empire of wealth, but a legacy of dignity. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything.